Hello there, people. Welcome back to the 10th episode of The Trans Agenda, a show in which we discuss trans news in an inclusive manner that expresses the full range of trans people's humanity. My name is Ethel, they, she pronouns, and I'm joined today by the editor for Essence of Thought, Levi,
Hi everyone.
from the A Levi Called Bird YouTube channel. Levi goes by he, him pronouns. Today we have a rather broad range of topics, some of which are quite depressing is probably the correct term. We are of course starting with our main topic tonight, which is assigned male comics creator is exposed for sexualizing minors. Then we have more than 147 anti-LGBT plus bills flood US legislation. After that, we have US News spent 54 minutes covering 44 trans murders in 2020. Then we have Exeter Gender Identity Clinic only assesses 2 new patients in 2020. Following that, we have Graham Linehan invited to speak about free speech by Parliament. Then we finalise with cis woman wins North Carolina Wrestling State Championship. After which, we go on to discuss my last video, which was, of course, let's discuss ContraPoints open worship of domestic abuser Buck Angel. So, yeah, not many happy topics there. Perhaps the only one that you can really consider a happy topic is the cis woman who won the North Carolina Wrestling State Championship. But we will get through this together. Now, before we can begin, we'd just like to make a couple of things clear, starting with the facts that we are fallible and therefore we make mistakes. If you notice anything we've got wrong, feel free to message us during or after the show, and we're more than happy to update the stream description to include any errors. Likewise, whilst we attempt to compile a list of content warnings for topics we'll cover, posting them to the very top of the description, there's always the possibility that we may miss one or two. So just as with the mistakes, if you think we're missing a content warning, feel free to suggest it so we can update the current list. The current warnings for today's show are child sexual abuse, grooming, sexualization of minors, gaslighting, victim blaming, abuse culture, transphobia, murder, hate crime, domestic abuse, deadnaming, misgendering, Sophie Labelle, Graham Linehan, and gatekeeping. And again, due to the topics, that's why there's so many content warnings today. Also know that there's a link to the show's agenda, which has with it all of the various sources found in the description below the stream. So yes, with that done, I guess we should sort of go on to the housekeeping. Already done the intro, so that's done. We no longer monetize our videos or streams, so the only way that we can make money is via Patreon or Super Chats. So if you'd like to support us, then please do consider donating via those means. Even $1 to $2 sponsors goes a long way to help things. It allows us to pay for Zoom, it allows us to, well, put food on the table. We would like to grow things so we can start hiring on other people. Namely Levi is currently top of the waiting list. But yeah, so do consider helping the channel if you can. If you can't help out financially, do share the stream, like, comment, etc. All this interaction boosts our position in the algorithm, helps the information get out there to help more people. Speaking of Patreon, however, we'd just like to thank the following patron sponsors: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Soren Katie, Gert Van Vorst, Steve Corbin, Sosh Daniels, and Justin Allen. Their support has been constant, and we thank them all for helping us keep things going. So, yes, anyway, moving forward, I'm just checking, yes, sorry, she, they, so yeah, she, her, they, them. Moving forward, I guess we should really get on to the first topic of today, which of course is assigned male comic creator exposed for sexualizing minors, which starts on the 25th of February 2021. Myself and Levi were made aware of the fact that the creator of the popular trans comic series Assigned Male Comics, Sophie Labelle, pictured in the thumbnail, had a second Twitter and Patreon account, on which she drew art sexualizing minors. The account was at the Waffles Free. And so we noticed these sort of conversations starting to come into our Discord, so we decided to investigate and see what was going on, and what we found was really quite disturbing. The first thing I sort of got sent in response to all this was Sophie's response to the criticism she was receiving on the 25th of February. Sophie went to Facebook and stated that, quote, "I make some diaper fur art. I have a kink I indulge in responsibly, and I refuse to be shamed for it. The people shoving my art and my life into everyone's faces are bad faith actors looking for an excuse to attack trans woman, even, sorry, end quote. Sorry about that, I don't know why my brain was doing that. So there's a couple of things to note here, first of all. The whole idea of kink. Kink is inherently sexual. Some people go, oh, but no, kink and fetish are different. That's true. A fetish is technically something that requires you to engage in it in order to be sexually aroused. We don't use fetish in that way typically. We use it synonymously with kink. Kink is inherently sexual. That is something to point out. That does not mean aspec people cannot engage with a kink, just as aspec people can engage in sexual conduct. They're just not sexually attracted to the person, they might be interested in the act itself. It also doesn't mean that everyone who does engage with a kink has to be doing it purely for sexual means. There can be other reasons to do it, but those other means does not desexualize the kink any more than, for example, going back to the aspec people engaging in sexual conduct does not suddenly desexualize that conduct. You wouldn't say that if an aspec person decided they wanted to give a blowjob a try, oh well, blowjobs are no longer sexual. That's not how things work. Kinks are inherently sexual, especially the phrasing of kink shame. Kink shaming is definitely attached to the sexual scene. And yes, I get that there's sort of been this joke going around of X is my kink, where X is like this mundane item. That also does not desexualize kink. What's more is, it's quite clear that Sophie understands this is sexual in the fact that she notes she indulges in it responsibly. Why would she bother saying that if there wasn't a sexual aspect to it? I don't know. There's a few of these sort of things dotted around that I'm kind of noticing. One thing about Sophie Labelle in researching all of this that I noticed is she seems to go by she, her pronouns everywhere I look. All positive articles, her Wikipedia page, etc. She doesn't have her pronouns in her Twitter bio, which is kind of strange, but everywhere I look, I find that she's using she, her pronouns. I did notice when I was looking at the alternative account at the Waffles Free, the pronouns written there were they, them. And this caused me to wonder, like, actually, does she go by they, them? Has she done a post where she comes out about using they, them pronouns that I just wasn't aware of? Not as far as I've been able to find. And it's like, seeing the fact that she typically goes by she, her pronouns, except on this account, which is sexualizing minors, makes me wonder whether she's doing this to kind of try and anonymize herself. Sadly for her, her art style is very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Is very noticeable, and it's quite clear that it is her, and she's gone ahead and now confirms that yes, it is her, since people have been sharing art from that account. It's also linked to the Patreon. So, these sorts of things, the I indulge in responsibly, and the fact that she's trying to anonymize her art sexualizing minors, that does scream to me that on some level she knows exactly what she is doing and she knows it's wrong. Now, before we get to the actual art itself and discuss that, I just want to go over why both myself and Levi are talking on the topic. I'll talk about myself. I think Levi has a few things he wants to say about his experience in regards to this. As the title of today's show notes, I am a survivor of childhood sexual assault. I was abused as a child, along with my mother and brother. We ended up in a domestic violence refuge, and there, both myself and my brother were sexually assaulted. Um, on top of this, as well as being assaulted later on as a teenager, especially when I was outed as bisexual, on top of this, there was a point in time where I was part of the furry fandom. And during my time in the furry fandom, I went through a very rough patch, and someone who took advantage of that was a 35-year-old man. I was 14, 15 at the time. He came in, he'd been making himself my friend for a while, and unbeknownst to me, he was grooming me. And then he kept making sexual advances. At first, I didn't know how to react, etc. But I finally caught on to things. Told him that if your idea of me being nice to you is going to lead you on to think that I'm going to be sexual with you, then you can just go. Which resulted in him becoming very aggressive to me. When I spoke out about this publicly, it led to a harassment campaign. I was still a YouTuber at the time. I was a furry YouTuber. I went from YouTube account to YouTube account trying to escape this harassment. Never could, which is why I abandoned the furry fandom, and that's actually how I ended up in the secular community. So I have experience of both childhood sexual assault and internet grooming. So when I'm speaking on this topic, this is my standpoint. Okay? I'm not just someone who's decided, like, this is a pet project, I want to make an issue out of this. No. This is something I have a personal stake in, if you will. Yes, I'll let Levi discuss his own.
Right, yeah. So I'll be discussing certain aspects of my experience in a bit more detail later, but just as an overview, I'm the youngest of 3 children, and my oldest brother is not only, like, I don't want to say he's disabled because I worry people will just say, oh, disabled means abuser. That's not true. But it does affect the situation, of course. When he was getting to an age where he started becoming aware of sex and interested in sex, his reaction to that was to start abusing me because I was the youngest. I didn't know what was going on. I was the most vulnerable. Also because he perceived me as a girl. And so for several years, I had to deal with sexual assault and these sexual comments and being exposed to sexual material and a lot of things that were like mannerisms and behaviors which weren't explicitly sexual, but it was clear, and I knew on some level that he was trying to communicate to me, I'm sexualizing you and I'm doing this to make you feel uncomfortable, and just a lot of terrible things. I don't have as much experience with online grooming. I think a couple of times people have tried to groom me online and it's just kind of gone over my head. So some of this situation is new to me, but I am extremely attuned to attempts to sexualize minors because I grew up in this environment where I was constantly being sexualized in fairly subtle ways. So yeah, that's my experience.
Okay. So yes, going to the thread we compiled. Well, first thing I did when I really found out about it is I went to the Waffles Free, which is Sophie's Twitter page that contains all this material. There were 3 images in particular I was interested in. There was the image that sparks the whole thing, which is a picture of a small child wearing armbands climbing into a swimming pool with the caption "Safety First." This was what caused the entire thing to sort of explode because the image was quite clearly referenced from a viral video, which had been like all over the news, etc. So some people saw that, immediately made the connection, and realized that Sophie had, for the majority of the child, copied one for one. there was a real child that was being used to create this art. And the art was sexualized. That there's these little things that sort of get to you, like the fact that the child depicted in the art is climbing into the swimming pool, and yet they're already wet. The fact that the diaper seems to be barely hanging on, even though in the original it seemed to be on rather securely. The fact that there is exposed butt cleavage on the child. There's just so many little things that sort of, this is quite clearly sexualizing a minor.
It's just like, why would you do that if you weren't trying to sexualize them? They're small details, but they're also deliberate details, and they're details that aren't the first thing you'd think to do. The water one you could maybe dismiss as someone just not thinking the image through, but like the butt crack, the tail not being through the diaper like it usually is, all the other stuff. It's like you would only do that if this were deliberate.
2009, I remember all of the discourse around like tails looping through clothing, because furries they often have to design their own trousers and clothing because of that. It's a very very common thing, and why would you make the conscious choice not to do that and have butt cleavage exposed when that isn't in the reference? That is a decision to change this, which is done to highlight certain features. And when you consider what those features are, especially in the context of everything else, it becomes very disturbing. The second image is of another minor, a black cat laying back on a changing table wearing a diaper. The diaper is open, and this is where I linked it to the work of Irving Goffman, who did gendered advertising in sociology. And he discussed that different poses taken by different people in art convey different information. And the one that Sophie had picked for this one was part of the ritualization of subordination. A pose that is most often applied to women in patriarchal society, but not always. And it's chosen by the artist as a sign of submission, powerlessness, and sexual availability. So the pose coupled with the open diaper.
There was a comment as well.
Stop wiggling, it'll be easier, which carries with it incredible rapey undertones as well. There's so much to look into there.
For those of us who are not sociologists and may not be familiar with Irving Goffman, or whoever that is, because I admit that goes over my head. Just one thing I'll point out is in the image, the character's arms are behind their head, right?
Yes.
But if you think of a baby actually on a changing table, they don't do that. I'm not sure if they physically could, just because their arms are so small. Usually their arms are at their sides. So again, that's another conscious decision you would make to diverge from reality in a way that makes the image more sexual.
Yeah.
And it's like, why would you even take that chance in this situation?
Yeah, the whole arms behind the head thing is quite a common thing for porn poses, which also links to the next one, which is of a minor again. This time they are standing, but they're striking a very similar pose to this. It's again with the arms behind the head, etc. Again, it's not quite the same as the laying down one, but it's as close as you can get while standing up. And again, it is a very common porn pose. You put your hands behind your head, you push forward, and you exaggerate features down below. Speaking of those features down below, there is a very unfortunate line which seems to be trying to convey some sort of vulva in the image. And yes, I know people can argue, oh, well, that's just the crease of the nappy. That crease could have been placed anywhere. There is no way that Sophie, as an artist, decided to draw that, look at it, and realize, oh, this isn't a problem. Especially with all the steps she has taken to try and distance herself from it by using the pronouns to try and anonymize her stuff, even though her art's very characteristic. Claiming that she's I'm indulging irresponsibly. There is no way she missed that. This is an active choice.
And it's like you don't need to put creases in the nappy at all. I wouldn't be surprised if in real life a nappy might be like that, but you don't have to do that in the image. You're an artist. You can draw whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
You
But
don't have to do that.
The pose is designed to draw the eye down there. You'd kind of expect the artist to take more time to focus on that area. Yeah, the whole thing was just a clusterfuck. Like, if it had just been one image, that still would have been disturbing. But like, you could have understood, like, on some level, the argument. Hey, maybe this was just an accident. Maybe they just didn't think things through. But to do the same again repeatedly after you've shown that there is an issue here, you know there's an issue here, that you've got to be careful. Excuse me. To go ahead and do this repeatedly, that's a problem. And then to go on and say, I'm not going to be kink shamed for this, that makes it quite clear. This is sexualization of minors. There's a note saying, we can't say queer? What? You can say queer? Sorry, I'm having a look at the chat. Apparently there's a Q word being filtered. I don't know. I have no idea if it's something that YouTube has done. Sorry about that. If YouTube is messing around and you can't say the word queer, I'm sorry. It's not our choice. It's something that YouTube is doing, which, you know, YouTube has an abysmal track record when it comes to LGBT plus people on the platform. But yeah, okay. Anyway, so yes, I went...
sorry, while we're looking at the chat, I just want to highlight something that... I'm sorry, I have no idea how to pronounce that name, but I think in connection to the whole Kiwi Farms thing, pointing out, you know, oh, would you trust someone with a history of yelling fire when there wasn't one? Yes, if they showed me the fire, and that's an excellent point. We didn't get any of our points from Kiwi Farms, but if you can see it, it doesn't matter where it comes from.
Yeah. I'll note the facts then that Sophie later on came out and just said that she realizes now that LGBT plus people are also calling her out on her shit. However, they're getting their information from Kiwi Farm. I did not open Kiwi Farm whilst looking at any of this. I can't prove that. I can only let you know. The only time I have ever ended up on Kiwi Farm was when I was looking for a certain photo of a certain infamous stream for a different video, because they are the only ones who archived a copy of it, it turns out. And that was it. With this, Kiwi Farms was not involved. This is the...
I tried to look through Kiwi Farms to just trying to look for leads anywhere I could, and I actually found it easier to find them directly myself than go through Kiwi Farms. I could not find them on Kiwi Farms.
This is the Natalie defense. We saw Natalie Wynn of ContraPoints playing the same card back with the whole Buck Angel situation. Sophie Labelle, likely seen that it was very high profile, saw that it worked, and decided, you know what, I'm going to do the same. This seems to be something that's happening with predatory, trans, and abusive supporting trans folk. Anytime that they're getting called out, oh, well, you're just listening to Kiwi Farms. No, Kiwi Farms was not involved in this at all. The first thing I did was go to Sophie's own profile, track down the image to her new profile, and look myself. That's what I did, because that is how I work. And that's why the screenshots are taken from my own account. So in that thread, after discussing quite clearly how this is sexualizing children, how Sophie is noting that this is a kink, she would later go on to claim, oh, if a kink is sexual, then it's not a kink. I'm sorry, you've kind of given the game away by that point, especially with the indulge in responsibly. If it's not sexual, you wouldn't need to disclaim it that way. But you know it is sexual. I went on to note several different ways that this harms society, and specifically CSA survivors. I just need to find that. The first way that it harms society in general is that it grooms minors into perceiving their sexualization as normal. Putting aside the possibility that in Sophie's mind, these minors, these minor-coded characters, we'll call them then, were meant to be adults, the fact that she is using images of real children as references, and the fact that nobody looking at those could go, yeah, that's an adult. There's no balding spots, there's no grey hair, nothing like that. You can go, yeah, that's definitely an adult. The fact that anyone looking at those images would reasonably come to the conclusion that they are minors, that grooms real minors on Twitter, Facebook, etc., into thinking that the sexualization of them is completely normal. Now, a lot of people are going like, well, this isn't sexually assaulting anyone. That's not what grooming is. Some people don't seem to know what grooming actually is. Grooming is not the act of sexual assault. Grooming is dismantling the defenses. Like a predator, or those supporting a predator, dismantling the defenses of a minor in order to, open access to that individual sexually. It's preparation. It's the work before the assault. Lowering defenses, making sure that they don't go to an adult, making sure that they don't realize what's happening is wrong, that they feel isolated. These are all methods of grooming. And art like this does have that impact. For one thing, it can make a minor believe that not only is this okay, but if you engage in this behavior, then you're super mature, and that is a real danger. That is a problem that sadly exists online throughout many different communities. Looking back to my time in the furry fandom, there are several comics I read as a minor that I remember distinctly sexualizing minors. How those impacted me, I don't know in the long run, but it does have an impact. The way we are shown stuff impacts us. That's why representation matters so much. That's why having black characters, trans characters, gay characters in television matters so much, because it normalizes it in the child's mind. And these basic occurrences should be normalized. People being gay, black, etc. That should be normalized. The problem is when the same methods are being used by predators to groom and dismantle the defenses of minors. Okay? So there is that danger right there. And again, with Sophie and her art style, it is quite easy for a child who likes her comics because of they're colourful, they're bright, they're simple, etc. It's quite easy for a child to come along, recognise the art form, and go, oh, well, Sophie's this great person, everyone likes Sophie, therefore I can trust her. There's also that danger. This is particularly bad because Sophie, in the background, she works around a lot of children. She gives a lot of talks to children, etc. She interacts with them. So there are so many layers to this, and it is frankly terrifying. She may claim that she indulges in this responsibly, but that is ultimately trusting a predator to self-moderate, which is just something you do not do. I don't know if you have anything to add on that point.
I was kind of thinking about how my experiences, even though I don't think they technically count as grooming, there was a lot of normalization in that no one took the situation seriously, even though everyone knew what was happening.
There's a lot of crossover there, yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell you that it did have a massive impact. I never bothered telling anyone about what happened because I didn't expect anyone to take it seriously because they kept acting like it was normal. Mm-hmm. If it were less normalized, then maybe I would have gone to a teacher and said, hey, this is happening, and maybe something might have been done about it. But it wasn't, because, and like the thing is, a huge thing that I went through was my brother really started sexualizing me even more and being really creepy about things when I started going through puberty. And of course, if you've ever seen any of our culture ever, you know that sexualizing teenage girls is a huge thing that goes on. And so like it felt off to me, and it felt like this is a bit more than what usually goes on to me. But it didn't seem like that big a deal, because it's like, oh, this is what always happens to everyone, because our culture was just saturated with it.
Like,
you know, this normalization, not just what the predators are doing, but just in general, does have an impact, and it hurts minors who are being abused.
I mean, the way sociology actually defines childhood is a golden period of ignorance, blissful ignorance. I'm not joking, that is like the technical definition of how we define childhood in modern era. So, like, that is true. Like, minors are ignorant to the ways of the world. That's why we spend so much time and resources teaching them these things. So, if they're getting the message that it's not only okay, but it's good, it's cool to sexualize minors, they're going to pick up on that, they are going to internalize it, and they're not going to realize it's a problem. And you might think, that's ridiculous. Well, go back and look at, like, women who, like, come from generations where divorce for, like, domestic abuse wasn't a thing, from periods where marital rape wasn't even recognized, etc., and see how they react when they are informed that these things are wrong. Like, it's so mind-bending for them. Like, wait, so if I don't want to have sex, I'm not, like, I don't owe it to my husband. Like, you see that sort of reaction. They just don't realize what is happening to them is abusive, is wrong. Because that is the power society has, and you cannot underestimate this. So when you're putting out art sexualizing minors, that is the environment you are adding to. That's what we observe. That's what we see all the time, you know? And it's like a lot of people need to start understanding and start treating seriously. Okay, moving forward, another point 2. It harms survivors of childhood sexual abuse. You know, anytime I see shit like this, it fucking hurts, you know? It triggers my PTSD, chest cramps, throat clamps. It can completely destroy my day. It can completely derail things. Like, even talking about these things is incredibly difficult. My temperature is currently high as fuck because I'm currently running on adrenaline in fight and flight. You know, it has not just a psychological but a physical impact on CSA survivors. So
Same. You know, I don't know if anyone has noticed that I'm being extremely quiet right now, and it's because my brain is 3/4 shut down, because this is extremely traumatizing.
Like, these are not topics we go and we talk about because we enjoy them. We go and talk about them because no one fucking else is going to talk about them, not seriously, not with the reverence they deserve, not by highlighting the issues that need to be highlighted. You know, we'll come to criticisms people had of my actions and all that. There's one criticism I will say now, completely distinct from the rest, that was valid. Whilst I did content warning my thread, in which I did show the images, just to note, when I showed the images, I did not just I did not download and re-upload the images. I took a screenshot of the images, including the original Twitter post, so people could see that it was in context, it was highlighted, it wasn't the image itself, I wasn't just replicating it. I was critiquing the creation and posting of this. But anyway, in spite of that, one of the criticisms I did receive is that in my content warnings, I did not specify a content warning for showing images. I thought, like, the context would kind of give that away, but I appreciate that. Yes, I should have done that, and if I could do it again, I would have added that content warning, because it did hurt some people, and for that I am sorry. There was a request to take it down, but the thing is, by then it had already gained traction, and if you remove it and it doesn't regain that traction, well, then you just aided the predator in hiding. So I kind of had to weigh the cost and risk. Over time, it would fade below the algorithm. No one would be just coming across it randomly. So I was like, okay, it's best just to wait then, and, like, keep this in mind for future events. So, it does hurt people. And for people who think, oh, you don't realize how much it hurts, I fucking do. I was hospitalized over a panic attack. Many people have heard this story before. This is when I started to have my breakdowns in relation to what happened to me in my childhood in 2011. I was coming home on a bus, thinking about everything, being overwhelmed. I'd been sent home because I was having panic attacks, smaller ones. And then just on the bus, I just started blacking out. My vision started fading from the sides. I started getting tunnels. And I started rocking back and forth. Before I had to get out of the bus, I ended up falling out of my the chair that I was in, and just literally my legs wouldn't work. I was dragging myself on the handrail to the front of the bus, telling the bus driver to stop, which, as someone with social anxiety, telling a bus driver to stop in the middle of nowhere, which forced them to call another bus to come and get them as they called for an ambulance because they thought I was having a stroke or a heart attack. That's how severe panic attacks can be, that they can get. I realise that there is pain there. So, and that is what these sort of images can do. And again, this is another thing that people heavily underestimate. So, I'm sorry that I didn't give the proper content warnings. I should have done that. And I will keep that in mind for future. I am trying to improve that. But at the same time, I'm not the creator of this art. If I don't call it out, if I just leave it alone, and Sophie continues to produce more of it, well, that maximizes the number of people that are just going to come across it as this channel, as this alternate account grows. And she gets more money on Patreon, and then encourages her to draw more of this art, and it never ends. So you want to say
also,
something?
Unfortunately, with the way Twitter works, even with the best will in the world, even with the most perfect content warnings, they will just throw up random tweets from the middle of a thread onto your timeline, and the images will just be there. So unfortunately, that was always going to be something that would happen.
I wish Twitter had a spoiler option. Like Discord, so you could spoiler an image. So it's different. I know Twitter does now something that contains sensitive media. I wish there was a way that the viewer has marked this as containing sensitive media, because at least then if a person clicks that thread, they'll probably see, oh, it's part of a thread, scroll up, is there a content warning? Oh yes, there is a content warning, okay.
Yeah.
I wish Twitter had that.
Needs better tools as well.
You got to remember also, at the time, I was still in shock about all this stuff. I was trying my best whilst compiling all this.
That's actually, it's very interesting,
well.
And something I have in my notes is there's a lot of sympathy for how stressed and confused and upset everyone else is, but there's not really much sympathy for the fact that we were in shock, that we were upset and dealing with a situation that has impacted us both, and that we were, despite the best will in the world, perhaps not making the best decisions, and that we can't just go and fix everything, because that's not how Twitter works, that's not how the internet works. That there's no sympathy for the fact that we can't do everything perfectly. We had to make some hard decisions. But for everyone else, it's just like, oh, they were upset, it's fine. But yeah, I should wait until I get to that point in my notes, because otherwise I'll give the whole thing away.
No one else was really doing anything. The only posts I saw out there were generally by transphobic parties showing the images. But yeah, and we'll come back to why those images needed to be showed anyway. The third point, the third harm this causes, is it desensitizes the public towards the issue. Again, the public becomes used to saying it becomes not an issue, laissez-faire sort of a deal. Excuse me. But yeah, it is, by continually presenting this, it can reduce societal response to it. It can normalize it, make people defend it. We saw this with what happened. We'll come to people defending it later. Society just doesn't take the topic seriously. Society, people love to pretend that, oh, if I ever came across a predator, I would do X, Y, and Z. The moment it's someone they like, that goes completely out the window. And this is something that we've seen again and again. We saw it with the Me Too movement as well. Like, the moment is someone they like, oh, yeah, no, this attitude just goes out the fucking window.
Not just that, but if you like ask people, no matter how nicely you ask them, if you ask people, hey, can you not make jokes about that? Can you, not trivialize this? The reaction is so incredibly violent. It's even worse than the reactions I get for calling people out on ableism. People really like pedophilia. They just do. They just unironically like it. I cannot find any other explanation for the hostility you get when you make such a simple request. It's like, hey, don't joke about this. It's not funny.
The last main point is that it gives predators a place to hide by forming communities. And before, I was just going to talk about this in abstract, but I've actually got a bit of evidence. We'll talk about it now, but we'll probably come back to it later. When you allow art communities to draw child porn or images sexualizing minors, they will form communities, they will form friendships, bonds, Patreons, all of that stick. And with that comes community defense. Even if it's not a openly child porn community itself, it can very often attach itself to other communities. For example, in posting that we were going to do the stream, we noted that we were going to be talking about Sophie Labelle. Sophie Labelle was put in the image. Nowhere did we even suggest we were going to be talking about the adult diaper community or littles. We were talking about Sophie Labelle, this individual, this predator. Someone who used to be a moderator for both the chat and used to be a moderator on the Discord, Alhana the Gamer Girl, came out and vague tweeted, quote, "If you think you can pass judgment on members of the little community without making any attempt to understand said community and instead shutting down anyone who tries to teach you about the little community, then fuck you. Just because you are a CSA survivor does not give you the right to judge a community which for decades has been a haven for CSA survivors just because you don't understand it. And it is even worse if you are also a member of a minority that bigots also try to frame as a danger to children, to people who don't understand you and your community. It is nothing more than throwing one vulnerable group of people under the bus to protect your own. The self-same thing that was done to us in the trans community. Just respectability politics bullshit." End quote. Again, we had no intention of talking about the little community or the adult diaper community. That was never discussed in the original thread anywhere. I have not discussed it. But because there's a community defense going on, because these people are friends, they make that link. With the child porn art community, it's very often, oh, well, you're just silencing art. This is censorship. You're anti-art. This is anti-free speech. You're snuffing my artistic freedom. With this, it's the same sort of thing, but it's linking it to littles and the adult diaper community.
It's the whole slippery slope of like, oh, this harmless you think this harmless oppressed community shouldn't be able to exist.
It's like, no one said that.
And of course, the same thing happened with the naturism community as well. It's like, we're not talking about that. Fuck off. This isn't about you.
Ironically, when it came to Mystic, someone else gave us a source that, they were posting child porn elsewhere. So that again, this is a form of grooming. This is destroying people's defenses. It's reacting to actual predators associated with bigotry by comparing it to, transphobia. We'll come back to this because there was also the whole false equivalence here, we're comparing it to trans community. But this is an example of that community defense. By allowing these people to go unchecked, this is the sort of thing you allow. You never allow predators to gain a sense of community like this, where their art's going to be defended, because they will use that against survivors. They will use that against people who are impacted. Okay? So you have to be aware on that, okay? Wait, Mystic was posting that stuff too? Apparently they were posting in other Discords, from what we've been told from a trusted source.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
I completely forgot about that.
Yes, we were approached by a trusted source. They've been banned from other servers for posting this sort of content. Yeah, and it's just the whole community defense is what happened with me when I called out the Tony puns in the furry community. He said I was doing this to drag the furry community in general, and he just had an army of furries just turn up at my channels and just keep hate bombing me, sending me messages to kill myself, etc. And I tried to get away from that repeatedly, and every time he'd find me, they'd do the same. There was a fucking terrifying point around, I think, 2012.
Sorry, everyone.
There was a point of around 2012 where I actually was followed by one of Tony Pun's most vocal followers in the furry community on my new secular channel. And I was like, I hope they don't fucking recognize me, because at this time in the secular community, I was still quite small. And I just quickly blocked them, because it's like, no, I do not want any chance to sort of engage with them and they find out who I am. This community defense is fucking vile. And again, as with all these other points, I cannot understate or understress the issue here. The fifth and minor point in all this is that it might reinforce the predator's feelings towards others. It might reinforce a paedophile's feelings towards children, etc. Now, why do I say this is a minor point? Well, first of all, the evidence on this is ambiguous. I can show solid evidence of the grooming. I can show solid evidence of the harm this causes CSA survivors. I can show the evidence of how public is desensitized. I can show clear evidence of how communities will come to defend predators that are allowed to exist in their communities. When it comes to the science behind whether these sort of things reinforce a pedophile's feelings, the evidence is not ambiguous. What's the word? Inconclusive. And that's the thing. People that support these sort of actions love to drag it and pretend like this is all about whether or not this sort of thing creates new predators. And that is besides the point. That is not the only harm that takes place. And I'm more worried about the harm caused to the children. There's that potential, because again, it is currently inconclusive whether or not this sort of art does create new predators or reinforce the views of, existing pedophiles, etc. I mention it because it is a point that some people still do mention, and it's good to point out the facts that people who defend this sort of art try to drag the discussion over to that and pretend like that's the only thing that matters, when no, it doesn't. Here are 4 other points for you to consider. Rather than focusing on what we don't know, how about we focus on what we do know, what we can show to cause harm? I just want to note that. Okay.
I'm really sorry. I should probably just quickly go and check on why my phone rang. I'll try and be back as quick as I can.
Okay. Kind of wrapping this up now before we lead into your comments.
Yeah, that's why I'm leaving now, so I don't miss something important. Really sorry, everyone, that things happen.
Okay. So again, I did a thread including the screenshots of Sophie's Waffle account, breaking down the various ways that Sophie sexualized minors, as well as supplying evidence that Sophie used real-life photos of children in her art, which I just want to talk about, by the way, because again, this is someone who works with and around children. She used art of a child to reference sexualized art, okay? That is a violation of trust, consent, whatever you want to call it. The person who does that, the person who violates that consent, wants us to trust her to be around children. You don't do that. You just do not do that. It's nice to have you with us, Sosh. Not a problem. We've just been catching up on the thread, really, going over the 4 different points, or 5 points if you include the last one, as to how art of sexualized children harms people, or harms society. I am just currently reading through your comments just to see if there's anything specific to respond to. I've responded to the mystic question. Yeah, Catgirl Princess Felicia, if this is making you anxious, then yeah, I understand completely. Like, we don't do these streams to force people to watch them, but we need to discuss this. But yeah. Yeah,
Okay, really sorry about that, everyone. It's just my mum's not well. I'm having to take care of her, and I had to check up on that just in case she was hurt or something.
Okay.
Turns out she just didn't realize I was streaming.
Actually, there was one thing that I just remembered that I didn't come to. On the 27th of February, as noted, Sophie came back to argue that, well, if kink is sexual, then it's not a kink. But she gave the game away here in the fact that someone pointed out to me there was a comment which stated, well, it wouldn't matter if you're sexual, it's still perfectly fine, which she liked. So it kind of gave away the whole game there. She's just saying whatever she thinks she can say to get away with things. It's not a case of, people... It's not a case of she's actually genuinely sorry, she's going to try dealing with this, which, by the way, even if she were genuinely trying to deal with this, she still shouldn't be around children. But that's a lot of point. That's a big point that people seem to forget about this whole like redemption thing. Whilst you're redeeming yourself, and even after that, you still don't get put around your victims or potential victims. Kate, have you been on TikTok? The whole thing is full of people doing baby voices and dressing as young kids in maid outfits. And what sorts doing baby voices? Cis women as well, which in my opinion also helps harm survivors of childhood sexual abuse and desensitize the public towards the issue. So whilst there's everything, which is I can't access TikTok. I live in India, and in India it is banned because the standoff with China. So yeah, I can't be on TikTok. And like again, yeah, this whole thing just sort of feeds into this idea that it's okay to sexualize minors, and it is a problem. And honestly, like, with seeing how the communities have responded, I don't know if I can trust these communities, even the people who genuinely do argue that, hey, we make everything clearly adult and consensual and stuff like that. Seeing just how they defend predators like this, it's like, yeah. Yes, anyway, let's get to the response to the thread, which I believe Levi is planning on taking over for.
Right, yes. I have a lot of notes on this. So the simplest, bluntest, most obviously bad faith criticism of the thread was that, oh, it's reaching. Okay, first of all, no, it's not. It's just not. But even if it were possible to reach, like, that itself is indicative of a problem. Maybe this is a bit of a radical idea, but your art should never be something that can be mistaken for child pornography. Just don't do it.
As mentioned earlier, like, someone coming across that art and looking at it, there's nothing in that image that screams this is an adult doing something. That's kind of a difference that does exist actually for like photographs of littles and baby furs, etc. You can still see like this is an adult. With art like
Actually,
this,
yeah, in the early draft of these notes, I was going to go through a whole bunch of things that Labelle could have done to make this stuff okay, which I scrapped because that just seemed like. But like that's one of the things I was going to point out is if she'd done the exact same art, but the characters had adult proportions, completely fine, unless there's something I'm missing.
yeah, we will not be tolerating apologia for child grooming. Just noting that. Angry dog, good boy. So yeah, you can fuck off with that. They were
Go
doing
fuck
stuff
yourself,
to
you
groom minors.
piece of shit.
They're a predator. I don't fucking. I'm not playing this distinction game anymore. I don't care
No.
if she's acted on it. You know, I really don't give a crap about that. She is deciding the defenses of people, and she knows what she's doing is wrong. Again, I was indulging in it responsibly. Like, quite clearly, she knows this is sexual. The change of pronouns from she, her on her main to they, them to try and anonymize it, even though, sadly for her, the art style is very noticeable, she knows what she was doing was wrong. And even if it was like, oh, I'm coming close to a fine line that a lot of people see this way, if it was a case of, I don't actually want to sexualize minors, I don't want to groom minors, but I know a lot of people are going to see it that way, you would take steps to ensure that you didn't get seen that way. You would do certain things to make sure that people could tell that this wasn't minors. You didn't. Anyway, sorry, you go back to...
The bottom line though, here's the bottom line, okay, right? When it comes to, is this person a predator? Is this person not a predator? I don't give a fuck if they touched a kid or not. I know I said that I was sexually assaulted as a child, but when it comes to my PTSD, when it comes to the things that make me feel violated and ruin my fucking day, it wasn't the sexual assault so much as it was all of the gestures and the words and people not taking it seriously and downplaying it. It doesn't matter. You can fuck someone up so badly without laying a hand on them.
And
okay, if you're doing any of this shit, and if you're doing nothing when it's pointed out to you, and if you're playing these games of, oh, but it's not that bad, or oh, but this community, you're a fucking predator, okay? I'm done with putting up with people, coddling them while they and play these ridiculous games about, oh, my slippery slope. Okay, this isn't about a slippery slope. You are hurting people right now. Fucking stop it. Because I'm fucking done with this. I am done with it. I cannot anymore.
People don't seem to understand. You don't have to be the individual that benefits of something for it to have an effect. I use organic analogies a lot. People are going to think I'm a fucking functionalist at this. You know, all these like beetles, flies, etc. that have like warning symbols, so like poisonous or have a sting or whatever. They very often die when they're attacked, but it teaches the animal that preyed on them that, hey, you know, don't go for these creatures in future. With grooming, it's the same sort of system. Even if Sophie never gets the benefit of any of the people that she's groomed through her work, other predators can enjoy those spoils quite well. Now that she's doing baby fur, those predators, that is just like chumming the water. Those predators are going to come in and they're going to know that her community is ripe for the picking. Not only is she grooming them for her, but there are people in that community who will argue incessantly to defend them. Because if you condemn them, you have to now condemn her. Like, she has just chummed the water for child predators. You don't have to benefit something personally for it to be a fucking problem.
Actually, leading on to all those people who are umming and ahhing, you know, everyone loves to go all hashtag not all art whenever this comes out. But that's not happening, okay? People draw children and babies all the time without it being a problem. Mm-hmm. People have family photos of their naked kids and it's not a problem. Okay, the problem isn't with your art. No one is coming to take your art away. When I heard about this, I immediately went and found the images for myself to make sure it wasn't just people blowing it out of proportion. No one is coming to take your art away, you selfish, entitled fucks.
It's the same. It would be the same as arguing that when they went ahead and they banned photographs sexualizing minors, oh well, they're going to come for your normal baby photos next. It's a slippery slope fallacy, and that's not how things work. You know, the whole reason that the Simpsons movie, which you brought up, that was still given a PG rating in the UK, was
because the joke there
wasn't sexualizing minors. It was, you know,
the joke there was just the taboo around nudity and how Bart felt really embarrassed by the situation. And there was this whole like minute and a half scene where Bart was skateboarding naked on a dare, and there were increasingly contrived ways to cover up his genitals to keep it like PG. And then there was a section where Hedge had this very conveniently placed gap, and that was fine. And like personally, like I could see arguments for maybe we should try not to do that with the current culture and everything, but in a vacuum that is fine, because the joke there is how contrived it is. And the joke is the taboo of nudity. The joke is not sexualizing Bart. Bart was not sexualized in that scene.
Bart was not striking
no
a
one
stripper
is coming.
pose. If Bart had been striking a stripper pose, we would be having a very different conversation.
Yeah. So we're not coming for your artistic freedom. We're going after these things because they're sexualizing minors. And just because I know, since we did end up talking about this, I just want to say to the people who are getting out their pen and their pad, taking notes, trying to look for ways to sneak in sexual images to try and push the boundaries. Oh, how can I make this acceptable? Fuck you. Fuck you. I know you're out there, and you are just the scum of the earth. I'm so sick of you people. You make it impossible to have a nuanced conversation about this. You make the slippery slope, because we can't trust people to have these, to take advantage of artistic freedom and to try engaging with these topics, because you fuckers with your notepads come along and are like, how can I twist this to make my obviously sexual stuff okay? I hate you so much.
Another thing I've seen is there is a type of therapy for survivors of sexual assault which relies on them creating art. It can be paintings, drawings, whatever, relating to their sexual assault. And I've seen people come out at me like, oh, well, you're going to be banning this next. It's like, here's the thing. That therapy art is never published. It is private. It is kept between the person and their fucking therapist. We are talking here not about Sophie dealing with her trauma by having a private art file. Her computer was hacked, and like this whole thing that she sends to her therapist was like posted online or whatever. She was monetizing this. She had a Patreon set up. Okay? So, you know,
this is a topic I've been thinking a lot about in regard to writing, which I'm much more qualified to speak on than drawing, personally, because of looking into Lily Orchard and her fan fiction. And here's my stance on it, okay? If you are a survivor, I think if you're a survivor, or like arguably if you are someone who is extremely well read on the topic, and like extremely well read and well connected to the topic, and like know what you're doing and know how to do this sensitively and help survivors, but probably just if you're a survivor only, and you want to write or draw about what you went through and what it was like as a way to explore the trauma and stuff privately, I think that's fine. You know, part of like I can think of when I read Lily's fan fiction, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be interesting to change it in this way to actually make it center what the children went through? I think that's okay. But there's a difference between that and making pornography for other people to consume.
That's the thing. There's no critical lens here either. It's
yeah. If you want to make art to criticize the topic and to explore what you went through and you're a survivor and you want to do that privately, then that's fine. I think that's a good thing if you do it carefully, but that is not what happened here.
I'm sorry, we kind of derailed there.
Yeah, that's okay. I finished that section, so I can just go on to the next thing. The main arguments, the one that fueled this moral outrage, was the idea that you're going to hurt the kids by including their image, and that is very untrue, because the thing, first of all, the child was linked to the incident before we even got here.
Yeah.
The child will be linked to the incident regardless of what happens with the thread. There are several sources linking the child to the incident, not to mention the fact that their image is incredibly easy to find and it's very similar. One person argued that it was done via reverse image search and wasn't actually the reference image. And it's like, if it was done, if it was...
You can't reverse image search a video. I've tried.
But if you could...
I've tried.
If you could though, it's like someone's going to draw a connection between the thing and the other thing, then regardless of if there is a connection there. There's nothing we can do to stop the image of that child being connected to the incident. So acting like this child's fate is in our hands is just a fucking lie.
The difference is my thread as one coming from a CSA survivor is hopefully a lot more fucking compassionate than a lot of the bigots using this, because when I checked, it was mostly just the bigots who were making the connection with the photograph. Hopefully, my thread is a lot more compassionate than theirs. And I don't know what that's worth, but it might be worth something. But
some people were seriously arguing that, like, you don't have to take the image of the child down, but you do need to censor their face. And the thing is,
see their face really.
The face was turned away. In real life, the amount of face you'd be able to see is like maybe 2 or 3 centimeters. In the image, it's a couple of millimeters of face.
They're an infant.
And the picture quality.
The moment, like, give it 2-3 years, their face is going to look completely different. Excuse me.
Well, the argument was like, they're going to recognize themselves in the image. And it's like, they're going to recognize the image from the context anyway. The face was already blurred, not intentionally, but just because the image quality was that bad. Censoring the face does less than nothing. And we've explained this to people, and they still keep insisting you have to censor the face, or, as we'll cover later, they have a giant screaming meltdown and lash out at you for pointing out that their arguments are shit, because they don't actually care about the material harm done to this child. They're just derailing. They're just wringing their hands and approaching this from a place of moral purity for reasons I will never fucking understand.
I mean, this whole thing sort of stemmed... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I've got a few more points, but I don't know, you should probably say yours.
I was going to say, this whole thing sort of stems off the idea that I shouldn't have posted the images of, like, the art at all. There were people who were just against me posting them, even though, again, I didn't download them and upload them. I just took a screenshot which shows the Twitter, which shows in full context, hey, I'm critiquing this thing. I'm not just replicating the art, I am critiquing it. I'm taking the screenshot which shows the entire screen sort of thing. And to that, I have to say, like, the reason I had to share both the images that Sophie drew and the photograph, which noted it as a reference and quite clearly showed it was a reference of a real child. The reason I fucking have to do this is because society does not take this issue seriously. Another argument I got told is, you should take this to the police. Have you told the police? The police will deal with this. No, they fucking won't.
No, they won't.
Because drawn child porn is not taken seriously. I've had personal experience with the police with my own grooming situation. They did fuck all, even though I had evidence of this person, like, getting angry and threatening me when I refused to sexually reciprocate as a 15-year-old to a 35-fucking-year-old. They didn't do anything. If you've been watching what's happening in London right now with the Met Police, maybe you start getting an idea of why.
When I went to the police about my situation, like, they did the obvious thing of, you have no evidence. But they also just fucking abused me a whole bunch for no fucking reason. One of them yelled at me because she was too lazy to wait 2 seconds for me to finish my sentence. One of them did this whole impromptu fan fiction about, oh, this is what the defense lawyer would say as an excuse to gaslight me about what happened. The police don't fucking care. They love this shit more than the average person. Have you been listening, ACAB?
I mean,
have you been paying attention?
If there'd been photos, if it had been the photos themselves were sexualized, that might have been something different. Go to the police and then, they probably wouldn't do anything, but go to the police. If they don't do anything, then go public about everything. But that's the thing. Drawn art is not taken seriously at all. It's not legally taken seriously. There's no precedent on it. So I have to force this in people's faces until they start taking it fucking seriously and something gets changed. Okay? And that's the sad state of things. When there's no support for dealing with something, you've got to do that. So
people just love to dismiss. Like this happened with Lily Orchard as well. Is that got dismissed as this ridiculous call-out culture stuff, and it's like, what the fuck do you expect us to do? The police will not do anything. We already know that. It's not in the laws. It's just not in the laws.
Yeah.
I won't go too much into detail of this because it is a friend story, but a friend of mine was sexually assaulted recently, and I've been poring over the laws where they live, trying to find a thing that they can get the person charged with, and it straight up says in the laws you can't charge them based on the victim's testimony alone. We just won't do it. The law, it is so difficult. The standard of evidence you need is so high, and you'd think, oh, with the internet you have physical proof. Just don't give a fuck. Parasocial grooming is not illegal yet. Mm-hmm. If you groom someone directly, one person grooming another directly, that's illegal. If you groom an audience, there's a chance. In theory, it's illegal, but the police won't do anything.
If you groom one person, there's a chance. If it's parasocial, no.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. But yeah, anyway, moving on. So there was all this moral panic over the kid's going to be harmed by this thread. And the thing is, the chances of this kid even finding the thread are unlikely. There are 60 people watching this stream right now. This is not only an incredibly niche section of the internet, trans section of the internet, but it's not a very popular one either. We can't even afford to pay to 2 people. We're not a big platform. In order for this kid to be heard, they have to find the fucking thread first, and that's assuming they look for it today. Mm-hmm. It's already at the point where it's difficult for me to find it on my own timeline, just because I've tweeted enough things by now that I have to keep scroll down a fair way. If this kid is not already old enough to read, then by the time they are, it will be buried. Mm-hmm. This is not just a kid who has already been harmed regardless of what we do, but this is a kid who's very unlikely to read our thread in the first place. And the chance of them being harmed is being put through the hundreds or perhaps thousands of children that Labelle currently has access to and is currently harming. The moral outrage is so incredibly selective. They don't give a fuck about kids. It's just about shutting us down. And one thing I noticed I think earlier today, another thing that's very important is that ignoring the abuse doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And this is where it kind of connects to my own experiences, is that all these arguments are focused on protecting the child's innocence by trying to make sure they don't find out, rather than fighting for justice for them and for their safety and for the safety of other children. And, all these people saying the child would be horrified to find this thread. And they'd probably be horrified to find out that this happened to them, but wouldn't they also be horrified to find out that people covered it up? No one talked about it. Everyone tried to cover it up. Everyone attacked the people actually trying to protect children, rather than saying, this is wrong, we need to do something about the pedophile. And it's not the same, admittedly, because with my situation, the people covering up also knew, and I knew they knew. And oh no, sorry, it's not the same as my situation because I knew about my situation because it was directly happening to me. It wasn't a thing of you could keep me from finding out, but like it did have an impact seeing people who were trying to pretend nothing was happening, who wouldn't do anything. And that form of abuse in a lot of ways was actually worse than the actual sexual abuse itself. And I find that there's a lot of hostility even towards children when they don't play along with this as well. So many children who feel like they can't talk about it because, you're not allowed to talk about that stuff. That stuff isn't for kids. And yet it's happening to them and they can't talk about it because people would prefer to pretend that the child is innocent rather than actually protect them. And, when I say, why wasn't I taught about what was happening to me? Why wasn't I taught how to protect myself? Why did no one have an honest conversation with me? And there's the constant whinging and whining about, oh, I did my best to protect your innocence. And it didn't work. It doesn't work. So for all these people complaining that we're going to hurt a child, you are currently just as likely to hurt the child by what you're doing.
More so, I'd say. Because again, it's what happened with me when I spoke up against Tony. The entire community came down on me. And made it so safe that I had to abandon my entire community at the time and try to establish a new community and lived in constant fear that they would find me again. And
then there's also, the thing is, this harm isn't just an individual level of this individual child will be harmed when they find that they weren't supported and that their abuse was covered up. But also it has cultural impact. It creates a culture where, again, people are more concerned with pretending it didn't happen than preventing it from happening again.
People like to be comfortable.
They like to be comfortable.
The easiest way to be comfortable is to pretend like everything is perfectly fine. It's it's why so many people hate Greta because of her environmental activism, because she doesn't let them get away with it.
And of course, the reason why this image was posted to the thread in the first place is because it's not just about this child. There are hundreds or maybe thousands of children who are at risk from Labelle, who are going to be hurt by Labelle. Not who might be, but who will be hurt by Labelle if nothing is done about her, who have already been hurt by Labelle. And I kind of did a vague tweet about this, venting, because this situation has just been really hard for me for some reason. And I said, if you have the option of potentially harming a kid who's already injured or saving 100 kids, and you choose to save the 100, then apparently you're a child abuser now. That logic doesn't make sense for injury. But apparently when it comes to child sexual abuse, this is the pinnacle of morality, to say we should throw 100 kids under the bus to save this one kid who was already hurt anyway. I know it's not nice to have to think that a child has to be harmed at all. I know we prefer if everyone could get out okay, but we live in the real world where sometimes you have to make a decision. And the decision was, it's kind of too late for this kid, but we'll use what happened to them to try and protect other kids. And people are undermining that and meaning that all 101 kids get hurt. So well done for that. Round of applause. Because the fact is, we do need to show that real children were involved before most people take this seriously. Even in our own Discord server, where people generally know better, where I expected people to know better, I had to put out an announcement saying it doesn't matter if real kids are involved, it's still a problem. Please stop making this about whether or not real kids were involved. And luckily, most of our members, all the ones that were allowed to stay, of course, a couple had to be removed, but most of our members did learn once it was explained to them, but it still had to be explained to them. So, all of these people, as put wonderfully by, I can't remember who, but someone on Twitter pointed out, if this matters so much to you, then maybe make people take this seriously. You can't criticize Ethel if you won't fix yourselves first. Spend a bit more time getting people to actually take it seriously without seeing that real children are involved. Speak out about how drawn child pornography is a problem no matter what. And then maybe you can think about criticizing us. But until you fix yourselves and until you help us fix society, there's not anything we can do. And of course, finally, a lot of the criticism was just straight up bad faith, coming from people who we could see from their timelines had defended Labelle, or who refused to speak out about her, who would complain about, I don't know enough about the situation, but then apparently knew enough to criticize the thread that was actually informing people on the situation. This was not about concern for children. These were excuses that were made to shut down the situation so people could stay comfortable. Is there anything you'd like to add, Ethel, before I move on to the next section of this?
I can really think of? No, sorry.
That brings us then to @NotCursedE. So one of the people criticizing the thread was someone called Mallory Moore at Chican3Vi. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's in the document. Well, it's not in the document, but it's a link. You can see it. They responded to Ethel's thread decrying that the reference image was included and saying that this is the person arguing that it wasn't actually the reference image and that it was just turned up via reverse image search. So they weren't even doing the regular thing of, the child will be harmed. They were trying to say that it wasn't actually the reference image. And of course, Ethel had a quick look and, yes, you're defending Labelle. This is bad faith. I'm not listening to a word you say. And then Not Cursed turned up to complain about the image as well, arguing, and I quote, I haven't liked or said shit about Sophie's scandal, so you can't use the same BS argument you've used on Mal here against me. Take the fucking image down. Now I immediately saw the problem with this, and so I quote tweeted it and responded saying, wait. Someone with access to children drew child pornography and you didn't say shit. But when a CSA survivor acknowledges that an actual child was involved, you have to speak up against the CSA survivor? Yeah, don't act like you care about kids.
Just note, they did later on go on to defend Sophie. So, it was a case of, I haven't said it yet.
Well, we'll get to that. Okay. But I also said in that little 2-tweet thread, I didn't speak up. I said, I didn't speak up about pedophilia until I decided to shut down someone trying to expose the pedophilia isn't the defense you think it is. A larger account also responded to the same Not Cursed tweet saying, quote, apparently child sex abuse is just a scandal. But I wouldn't be surprised this account is shitting on CSA survivors while defending her pedo pal. As I recall, she threw MBs under the bus to defend ContraPoints too. Are all big trans accounts trash? I think yes. So Not Cursed ignored my response because no one cares that I exist. But quote tweeted that it's not your fault. I'll get there one day. And then I can deal with all the pedophile apologists abusing me on Twitter. But yeah, Not Cursed ignored my response, but the larger account, of course, being larger, got a response of, quote, I don't even like Sophie, if you must know. Her art has creeped me out for ages because I don't like it when an adult uses children to be their political voices, even if that child is one they've drawn. And they go on for a while. They say, if Sophie has actually done anything pedo-y, then fuck her forever. But the evidence Essence has posted is mostly a massive reach, etc., etc., etc. Again, I saw problems with this and responded saying, quote, once again, apparently actual child pornography doesn't even deserve a passing mention, but using cartoon children as a political mouthpiece is creepy. This outrage is so selective in the worst possible way.
And it's funny because, again, the one genuine criticism I discussed before we got to these points, just to like separate it from it, was the fact that I thought like having the topical content warnings was enough. I didn't put a content warning for images used. I also should have put content warnings at the top of all the image posts. And like I wish I'd done better. Okay. Like the reason I wish I'd done better is because there were a couple of people who were hurt by that. And it's like, so to say it's a reach when there are people genuinely hurt by that,
Yeah.
the evidence does not support. Continue.
Well, she does recant /s later on. Eventually she got tired of being called out on her pedophile apologetics, and she put out this whole statement. So she said, I won't read all of it, but I'll read some key sections, and the rest is linked in the document. She's like, I woke up to a few trans people and sharing this tweet, calling me a pedo, etc., etc. So first of all, I made that tweet when I had only seen one of Sophie Labelle's drawings.
But I'd included
the things
three, so...
Oh yeah, we'll get there.
Okay,
we'll get there. Please be patient with me. This is very detailed, I promise. The things Essence said about it to make it seem sexualized were a reach, in my opinion. She points out the things that were said. This is specifically about the dog in the pool drawing, which is the one she saw. She said it uses a reference image of a real child. The diaper is looser fitting. There's no tail hole in the diaper. And also she says there's 4 pixels of a line to indicate a butt crack. So she acknowledges that this was a butt crack and was intentional. She doesn't even try to argue what I expected people to say, which is, the artist slipped, anything could happen. She acknowledges this was intentional and still says it was a reach. Then she goes on to say, Essence posted the reference photo of a real human child. That's all I saw before I went off at S for claiming to crusade against child sex abuse imagery while literally posting a photo of a real life human child in that context. She says, on its own, that one image was not sexualized in my opinion. So she's just straight up saying this was not sexual when we've proven that it was. And she says, however, I've since been sent other... She says EGS. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be. I think it's a typo.
Examples.
Basically, she was sent... Oh, examples. Okay, yeah.
No.
I've been sent other examples of Sophie's baby fur, which, with credit to S, were in the thread and are bad in my opinion. And there's a very obvious criticism that I know is jumping out at people. I promise it's written down. I will do all of that once I've gone through the thread. So she goes on and on about how what Ethel did is just so bad and evil and just the absolute worst for several tweets. And then she says, regardless of whether Sophie is or is not a pedophile, which, yeah, I think she probably is given the other images, which are pretty blatantly sexualized, you should never, ever, 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 ever post photos of a child in this context. Never. You are not a good person for doing this. Again, obvious criticism. I promise I've seen it and I've written it down. Talks about how she's blocked Essence of Thought and says, I did, however, follow S. I did have a lot of time for them, and I don't think they're an awful or bad person. Which, given the language in this thread, which we'll go on to discuss, I don't believe that for a second. No. She says, I think they're on a moral crusade and have done an awful thing they're trying to justify after the fact. Which, again, no, we've discussed at length why this was necessary, even if it's not pleasant. She says, I won't be unblocking them or anyone else who has taken this opportunity to attempt to assassinate my character on the internet.com, though. Fuck off. I don't want these people following me, and if you're one of them, take the time while I'm away to hit that unfollow. Thanks. And she also says, she complains that, she's been accused of this stuff by right-wing people before, and it just brushes right off. But when it comes from people she actually liked and respected, it hit her hard. And then she says, in closing, fuck Sophie Labelle forever and essence of thought, delete the fucking photo. See you in a few days, heart. So what is wrong with this statement? First of all, I've skipped over a lot of it, so you don't see the full impact, but there is a lot of emphasis on Ethel's actions to the exclusion of everything else. I made myself a little list so I could keep a tally. Out of these 16 tweets, 4 of them were negative things about Labelle. 1 of them was a neutral thing about Labelle. 1 was a positive thing about Ethel. 1 was not in any particular category. 3 of them were whinging, basically, about how hard everything is for her. A whopping 6 of the tweets included making excuses for her behavior. It's not cursed behavior. And finally, 12 out of 16 tweets were negative things about Ethel. So 4 negative things about an actual pedophile who made child pornography completely unprompted, 12 negative things about a CSA survivor and an activist and someone she allegedly respected who made an educational thread trying to raise awareness about that pedophile because the thread was not done perfectly to her impossible standards. Secondly, she is very soft on Labelle in her language. Compare, quote, they do look significantly more sexualized than the others, unquote, and a modified quote, I think Labelle probably is a pedophile, given the other images which are pretty blatantly sexualized, unquote. 2, quote, you should never, ever, ever, ever post photos of a child in this context, unquote, and, quote, there was absolutely no need to post the reference image at all, unquote, and, quote, it still does not justify what S did. In fact, it makes what S did significantly worse, unquote, and, quote, this is bad, this is wrong, this is completely fucked up, and they need to delete it immediately, unquote. I know that was a lot of quotes in quick succession, but hopefully we can see that there's a bit of a tonal difference there, just a teeny bit between how she talks about the pedophile and how she talks about Ethel. And you may have noticed, if you're very into words the way I am, that the statements about Ethel are very definite and harsh. You know, this is bad, this is wrong, they need to delete it immediately. It still does not justify what S did. These are very definite, harsh, clear-cut statements, while the statements about Labelle are very flexible and soft. Well, they do look significantly more sexualized. I think Labelle is probably a pedophile.
No mention of Sophie deleting her Patreon, no mention of Sophie deleting her Twitter, stopping working with children, getting therapy, nothing like that.
And yeah, I will expand on that as well. But before no, it's a good point, and I did not have it in as much detail as that, so thank you. But yeah, a brief tangent about words, just to prove that I do, in fact, do something useful on this channel. So I do apologize kind of a bit just for switching to a very academic, abstract discussion, but I think it is important. So in English, we often use something called a hedge to make our language sound polite or non-threatening. The most common hedge, the one that you probably use every day, is turning commands into requests. For example, you don't say, close the door, you say, please close the door. Or if you want to be very polite, you might say, could you please close the door? So that's the general idea of what a hedge is, but we also hedge factual and moral claims when we want to try and make them more threatening, when we want to try and make sure that people won't, argue with us too much, when we don't want things to get too heated, when opinions conflict. And the 4 main ways that we do that I've noticed is, well, we'll add in my opinion to statements, even when it's maybe not necessary. because it's obvious that it's your opinion. Just adding in my opinion, it signals that, you might have a different opinion. You're free to disagree. I'm not saying that this is definitely true. We'll use words like probably or somewhat to make our claims less definite and less objective. Saying this happened versus this probably happened. You're leaving room for doubt there. We'll also focus on our perceptions. We'll say it looked bad. It sounded like an argument instead of saying it was bad. There was an argument, to highlight the difference between what we perceived and how that could be wrong compared to what actually happened. And we might add unnecessary qualifiers as well. For example, I might say the Sydney Opera House is one of the most recognizable buildings in New South Wales, or Uluru is one of the most recognizable rocks in Australia. I might say that even though there's really no need for it, just so that, just in case if I have forgotten a more recognizable building, or someone maybe, or rock, or maybe someone else thinks another landmark is better, then I don't have to argue with them too much, because I've said, hey, I'm not saying it is the most, they're both kind of up there. It's fine. So that is hedging when it comes to factual and moral claims. And another hedge, of course, is pretty. The word pretty, of course, can be used as an intensifier, like when you say pretty please, but it can also be used as a hedge. If you say that's pretty ugly, you're still calling it ugly. People are still going to get offended, but not as much as if you say that's ugly. Or, if you say that's pretty pathetic, people are not going to be as offended as if you say that's pathetic. Mm-hmm. And so I went through this thread this evening in like 2 hours before the show, and I went through and I found all sorts of hedges that Not Cursed uses. There is one time Not Cursed hedges for Ethel, which is when she says, this was a picture of a puppy climbing into a swimming pool, and the things Essence said about it to make it seem sexualized were a reach, in my opinion. So she adds that, in my opinion, hedge. But given that this thread is in response to criticism for dismissing the evidence in the thread, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to guess that she's just trying to cover her.
It's also, she says that, the evidence in the thread is a reach, right? And then she goes on to acknowledge that I did link the 3 images, that I did post the 3 images, which she now agrees are sexualized. So she's sticking by the thing about the dog being a reach, because she can get away with that.
She
says the thread's the reach. She doesn't say just the dog. She says the thread.
Very true. There's a lot of flip-flopping here. Oh, the quote I read out, she did say the picture of the puppy climbing into the swimming pool, but there is a quote I'm forgetting where she says the thread as a whole is a reach. But this is highly dishonest. There is a lot of flip-flopping. But yeah, Not Cursed hedges for Sophie. If I'm remembering correctly, if I didn't forget to go through the threads while working on other things, she says, I've since been sent other examples of Soph's baby fur, which, with credit to S, were in the thread and were bad, in my opinion. So not that these things were bad, but they were bad in her opinion. Even when she acknowledges that this is evidence of Labelle being a pedophile, she still cannot acknowledge it. She still has to hedge that this is just her subjective opinion and that you're free to disagree. She says of the art, they do look significantly more sexualized than others. Not that they are, but that they look that way. Again, this is just her perception. You might see it differently. And she says, I think she probably is, in reference to Labelle being a pedophile, I think she probably is, given the other images, which are pretty blatantly sexualized. So again, it's likely, but it's not certain that she's a pedophile, even though I'm apparently admitting that she is a pedophile, conceding that she is a pedophile. And the images, they weren't blatantly sexualized, they were just pretty blatantly sexualized. So there's all this very soft language, all of these hedges to downplay and detract from what Labelle did. But then when it comes to Ethel, it's all very definite stuff. This was bad. This is unacceptable. There was no need for it. And Not Cursed also more explicitly leaves room for doubt. You may have caught before. She says, regardless of whether Sophie is or is not a pedophile, as opposed to, yes, Sophie is a pedophile. However, that second one, that still would have been bad, but at least she would have been definite about Sophie being a pedophile. At least that would have been non-negotiable. But the way Not Cursed phrases it, she's saying, look, I think Sophie's a pedophile, but if you think she isn't, that's fine. Agree to disagree. And that is just not okay. That is not the actions of someone who cares about pedophilia. That is not about the actions of someone who has realized what is going on and is taking the situation seriously. That is the actions of someone who is covering up for a pedophile, who is saying, having a problem with this is not mandatory. You don't have to see what's happening here. We can agree to disagree. Fucking disgusting. That alone should have gotten her banned from the internet. I cannot. And of course, she did say some negative things about the bell, but the only truly negative thing, so in my tally, how many did I have? I had 4 tallies for negative things about the bell, but like they're so couched in this soft language. The only truly, definitely negative thing she says is fuck Sophie Labelle forever. And the problem with this is that it's a nothing statement. As Ethel said before, nothing about what she did wrong, nothing about what needs to be done about it. It does not have that incredible detail like the moral outrage against Ethel does.
Like, I even
got a couple other
specified that
points.
something needs to be done because, like, Sophie works around children in my thread. I didn't just leave it open. I was like, this needs to be tackled.
It's just very interesting. Very detailed demands are made of you. You have to take the image down. You need to do this. You need to do that. This is why it's wrong. But when it comes to Sophie's behavior, even the stuff that was spoon-fed to her, she has to downplay as like, oh, it looks that way. The only definitely wrong thing she can say is fuck Sophie Labelle forever, which can mean literally anything. It could mean she's a pedophile. It could mean that she doesn't like Not Cursed's favorite trans celebrity. I don't fucking know. No one fucking knows. That doesn't mean anything. I could jump onto Discord right now and message all of my friends saying, fuck Ethel forever. She's the absolute worst. And they would be like, okay, so you're just having a joke, right? Something happened in Minecraft or whatever. Because it means nothing. It means fucking nothing. Saying that does not absolve you, does not mean you're not a pedophile apologist. It means that you are putting a very thin veil over your pedophile apologetics. And the thing that jumped out at me immediately as well is she did not acknowledge the very serious mistake she made. She admits she did not read Ethel's whole thread. Not that she didn't do enough research, but like the thread was right there, a thread on this very serious topic that she is definitely taking very seriously. And she saw something she didn't like about it and decided to stop reading partway through. That is something you simply do not do. I don't care if this thread is the most, heinous thing you've ever seen. You fucking read the entire thing. You make sure you know what you're talking about. This is not a situation where you can just afford not to do the research. If you do not want to do the research, then you sit down and you shut up. We do not have time for people who do not feel like doing the research, but who want to keep speaking on the issue. For those of you who were around in 2019, you remember how infuriating it was when Rachel Oates kept being like, oh, I don't understand the issue, and kept talking about it anyway. Well, multiply that by 1,000,000. That is a situation we're dealing with. This is a serious situation. We're trying our best to deal with it. We're trying our best to make positive change. And all these fuckers can do is they can get on their high horse and rant about how they don't like this and how they don't like that, and they don't even know what's going on. We do not have time for you to play, superhero. We don't have time for it. Get a grip. Jesus Christ. If you actually care, not only would you read the entire thread, but you would do your own research like we did. That's what happened. When I realized what was going on, when I saw what people were saying in the Discord, I immediately dropped everything to research for myself. That is what she should be doing if she wants to moralize about how we're not doing enough. Yeah. Fuck you, Not Cursed. Really, you were just the most disgusting person I've ever had the displeasure of seeing. She also made no apology for this massive mistake. Let's say she does make the serious mistake. It's in the past. She can't change that. She did not apologize. She did not say, I'm so sorry. I should have looked into this. I've been defending a pedophile this whole time. She didn't fucking do that. But you know what she did do? She made this about herself and how she needed a mental health break. And, you know, how this hit her hard. You know, her feelings matter more than getting things right.
I open my thread by noting the fact that I'm a CSA survivor, but apparently that doesn't get me the time.
No, we don't get time. We don't get leeway. She gets we'll be getting to that so in the next section. She gets so much fucking leeway. But, and she also framed that, like, the criticisms of her, the analyses of the things that she said and did, including quotes like what I have just done, as a character assassination. When her own blatant character assassination, which I've covered in detail, you know, the tone, biasing one person over another, the, you know, dishonest arguments, ignoring shit, just straight up gaslighting people to say that this isn't really a problem. That's being passed off as criticism. She's allowed to say what she likes. That's her freedom of speech. But if you criticize her for it, that is a character assassination. Fuck you. And yeah, complaining about how it hit her hard to be labeled, quite rightly, as a pedophile apologist by people she liked and respected, when she did a similar thing to Ethel. She treated them, a CSA survivor of all people, as worse than a pedophile, because that is what she's doing. When she reacts to a pedophile like, oh, yeah, that is kind of bad, and then she goes on this massive rant about how horrible Ethel is, she is saying implicitly, Ethel is worse than a CSA, is worse than a pedophile. Ethel needs to be condemned more harshly than a pedophile. She did that. She assassinated their character with all of these bullshit arguments, with ignoring the fact that we really did not have a choice if we wanted to do this effectively, but to include the image. This ridiculous stuff about how they should have known better, and it's like, they do know better. That's why all of this shit happened. In full knowledge that she's not only someone who, like, oh, this is a small account that we happen to respect. No, she is a prominent transgender journalist that many trans people like and respect. She has this platform where there's things that she says and does actually carry weight. It's not just like, oh, this is going to hurt people's feelings. Like, this could actually mess with things materially. None of that matters because it doesn't affect her. Only her feelings matter. Speaking of being hit hard by the words of people you once respected, I have a whole other section, but is there anything you need to say, Ethel, before I get into that?
No.
Okay. So, Chrisiosity. A few days after all of this stuff, not cursed E, I noticed that some of my mutuals were following her. And I did not feel safe after all of that. So hopefully we can understand why I felt very uncomfortable with people following her after all of that. Wait, sorry. When you say pedo, do you mean someone that likes kids or an actual child molester, rapist? Like anyone who does sexual stuff to kids.
Someone who is grooming children.
If you're grooming children, if you're drawing art of children to get off of, even in fucking private, if you... I don't care. It's all pedophilia. I'm done, like, playing games of dictionary and trying to be charitable. If you're doing sexual things to kids, even if it's in private, even if it's without a kid's knowledge, you're a fucking pedophile and you need to piss off. No charitability anymore. I'm done with being charitable.
I mean,
it's about time
she works with children. She works around children. So, like...
I actually saw there was a someone pointed out, and they have photo evidence of this. She did an all ages reading thing in a sex shop where there are dildos on the walls. This is a pedophile to the nth degree. The only way she could be more pedophile is if she actually raped a kid, and I wouldn't be surprised if she did. Like, there's no room for charity. It's time to stop worrying and umming and ahhing about wrongly labeling people pedophiles because they didn't do enough bad things, and it's about time we start respecting survivors, for fuck's sake. But yeah, I did not feel safe around people who were okay with not cursed E because of everything. And so I realized I could either soft block these people, many of these people who I liked, or I could inform them of what happened in the hopes that they just weren't aware and that they would do the right thing. So there are a couple people I realized there's no point, I wasn't even going to try. One of them, I saw that they were speaking about a middle ground, and I just immediately went ahead.
There's no middle ground with pedophilia. I'm sorry.
There's no fucking middle ground here. Yeah.
What
And
if we rape
another one,
some of the children?
Yeah. Like, there are people who are like, oh, I need a middle ground between saying she did nothing wrong and that she's a monster. And it's like, no, that's not what nuance means. You just don't want to tackle what happened. You just want to be comfortable by saying, oh, something happened, it was bad, but I'm not going to actually engage with it. Like, fuck you. You're an enabler like the rest of them. I'm sick of it. But yeah, there was like one or two I was just like, I'm not going to get through them, I don't think. I'll just soft block and save myself the trouble. Because the thing is, I was terrified to approach people about this. Already, I'm not a fan of approaching people on Twitter about the people they're following. It just makes me anxious. But like this situation, I was so scared. And like everyone I contacted, they can tell you, I responded saying, thank you so much for doing the right thing, because I was terrified of what was going to happen. But I did I informed several people, and luckily many of them did do the right thing. Many of them were actually very supportive. I've had some wonderful conversations with some people who said, you know, what's happening is ridiculous and thank you for what you do. And, you know, I hope you're okay. And to those people, you know who you are. I can't overstate how grateful I am for that. You know, thank you so much. But one of the people I contacted who did not do that was Curiosity.
To give some background, if you don't know who Curiosity is, because there might be people who have just joined. Curiosity is an old friend. She was there throughout the Woodford situation. She was part of the crew that helped me when Graham Linehan was going to sue me. She is someone I've had a lot of respect for. Yeah. So anyway, continue.
I'm really sorry this had to happen.
Don't say sorry for that. I'm just like setting like, because people are like, oh, well, it's like Kirsty, for example, mentioned, oh, it was so hard for like someone like that used to respect coming out and doing this stuff. It's like, how do you feel it is for a CSA survivor? You know. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, I should actually just quickly talk about who Curiosity was to me. I didn't know her that well because, of course, I'm fairly new to all of this. You know, I was not in. I was kind of lurking in the community, but I didn't even know about Essence of Thought until late 2018. Didn't really get involved in anything until the Woodford situation. So I'm a newbie. I didn't know Curiosity that well. I know, you know, she. Like I'd heard the name places. I get the impression that she has somewhat of a platform and a presence. I, of course, worked with her during Roll to Save. She was one of the first people to follow my YouTube channel because of the whole Woodford stuff. And one of the people I was like really excited about following my channel because it's like, oh, people who actually have a presence of following me or subscribing to me. That's amazing. And of course, she's much older than me. I think at least 10 years, if not more, or definitely at least 10 years, if not 20. And also, like, she was one of the people who took the right stance on Tara Reid, and like, I thought she was someone who could be trusted, basically. I thought she was someone who I could have an honest conversation with, and you know, maybe she would have a milquetoast response, but if I like explain things to her, she would come around. And no, it turns out no, she's not like that at all. When I explained the situation, she said, quote, "I'm going to give her a chance to cool down. I believe this is a very triggering situation for her, and we'll see if a few days break helps clarify things." And this is what I meant before. People like Not Cursed get all the leeway in the world, even when they do, you know, horrific things that they did not have to do. And then, like, we do the slightest thing that isn't perfect, especially Ethel does the slightest thing that isn't perfect, and, like, just, it's like the world is ending. You know, I really wasn't comfortable with this response. It really seemed wrong to me, but, like, the gaslighting was so bad, the anxiety was so bad, that I basically let it go without comment. I was like, I wouldn't hold my breath if I were you, but I let it go. And then Christiosity decided to approach me unprompted to explain that Ethel should take down the picture, because imagine how horrible the parents would feel. Did you want to go on a rant about why this is wrong?
This is the common fucking argument I've just seen time and time again. I even hinted in the post about my feelings towards parents uploading pictures of their children online. I think it's a very questionable act for parents to upload pictures of their children or videos of their children online in places that they can be accessed publicly. I am someone who believes there should be an element of privacy and that should be respected. Of course, you can't do everything if someone's filming at a public event or whatever, but videos that especially center children, etc., uploading to your Facebook privately and stuff like that, stuff where friends have access to it, yeah, that's fine. But I do think we need to have a conversation about privacy and consent in the digital age. I don't think society has grown with that, so I'm quite reserved. I take a problem with that. But the idea that, the parents have any fucking sway in discussion about images that they've chosen to post online and allow news rooms to use, replicate, post, etc., which is how Sophie came across the image in the first place, that they have any fucking right to say on the usage of the image is fucking disgusting. I get if you want to talk to me about the harm this could have on the child 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, if they ever come to find out about things. Parents, I do not fucking give a crap about. My mother, wonderful, she's never done this sort of thing. She's never, tried to limit me. But the idea that her comfort somehow trumps doing the right thing and protecting children is disgraceful. Those parents signed away any rights they had when they posted that video publicly. And again, centering the parents' feelings on the matter over the impact this is going to have on children, not just the child shown, but other children out there who are being groomed now as a result of this, it is just disgusting. I'm sorry, I'm tired of it. Also feeds back into this idea that a lot of parents like to play ignorant about things, even when they know that sexual violence is happening in the family towards children. They might put a stop to it in the media, but they'll still keep that predator around, because it's what they've grown up with.
Which is what happened to me.
It's I'm sorry, parents have no right in this conversation. I don't care if you're a parent of a child upset about sharing this image. Shut the fuck up. If you're not a CSA survivor, genuinely censoring the impact this will have on other people who might be assaulted, groomed, whatever, shut the fuck up. You don't need to talk. You talking is exactly the same as parents of autistic children turning up and telling autistic people, you need to shut up, you can't self-advocate, you can't tell me that what I'm doing to my child might cause them harm. It's fucking disgusting. Piss off. No one wants to hear from you. Okay?
Here's the thing, is not all, I wouldn't say all children who are CSA survivors, because there's situations where it's you have no idea what's going on. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what happened to you in the refuge was an issue of your mum had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, she had no idea what went on with the refuge. But she knows I've started talking about this publicly. If she was I don't really feel comfortable about you talking about this publicly, I not probably in those words, but I would have told her to piss off. But she thankfully didn't.
But I won't say all children who are CSA survivors, but most children who are CSA survivors, myself definitely, only ended up this way because our parents did not know how to keep us safe. The idea that parents know what they're talking about is fucking disgusting when they're not the whole issue. Obviously, the issue is the actual predators, but they're a huge part of the issue, and parents do often fuck up way more than they have any right to, even when the situation is brought to their attention. even when they're given resources. Like, parents are a huge part of the problem. They certainly don't know what they're talking about. But like, when it comes to how the parents feel, I honestly, people who say this about anything are just the scum of the earth. If you want to have a conversation about this difficult situation will affect parents in XYZ ways, here's how we can support them. Like, once the dust is settled, then that's valid. Parents do need support. But the idea that they should come first is disgusting, because the thing is, parents are adults. If you as a parent find out that something horrible has happened to your child and it's affecting you, you can go and call up a therapist. You can go and drive yourself to therapy, or take the train or something. You understand what has happened well enough to process it. But when you're a child and this stuff happens to you, you don't know what's happening. You don't know who to ask for help. If you do try and ask someone to help, it's probably going to be a teacher who has no idea how to deal with it and just ends up abusing you further because of their own ignorance. That happened to me as well. Children cannot help themselves and keep themselves safe. They need our support, and that is why they have to be at the center of the discussion. The parents are adults. They can take care of themselves. They can deal with the consequences of their actions, or if that's not their fault, they can still deal with the consequences, because adults can take care of themselves. If you, as one of the people who have been bullying the fuck out of CSA survivors for this, if you as one of the people who have been bullying me, expect me as a very young adult and a CSA survivor to deal with the trauma of this on my own, you can expect someone in their 30s or their 40s or their 50s who may not even be a CSA survivor to deal with this on their own. The double standard is fucking disgusting. The parents need to take care of themselves. They're grown up. We need to be thinking about the children.
And Christiosity wasn't the only person who made this argument either. There were quite a few people who made this argument.
There were quite a few people who are like, as a parent, this makes me feel, shut up. I don't care how you feel. This isn't about you. It's not about you. It's not even about me. This is about protecting the children. Once that is done, then we can worry about other people. And frankly, you're not next in line. Next in line is CSA survivors. Then we can start thinking about parents. But yes, it's very interesting how, Not Cursed gets a free pass for actual pedophile apologetics because she must be triggered and upset. But Ethel doesn't get a free pass for what is, at best, a minor lapse in judgment. At worst, a minor lapse in judgment, despite the fact that we know for a fact this is a very triggering and upsetting situation for, all CSA survivors. There's a very interesting double standard. The parents get sympathy, Not Cursed gets sympathy. This one child in particular gets sympathy, but the actual children who are at direct risk, the CSA survivors who are having to deal with all of this disgusting, violent rhetoric, we don't get sympathy. And then Christiosity went on from there. I later found out the reason she approached me was basically like, oh, I don't feel like approaching Ethel about this, so I'll just go through you because you're also Essence of Thought, which I don't get it. I don't get it. But she went on to regurgitate the bad fit. Actually, yeah, sorry. I'm kind of twisting myself into knots. So I found out she approached me to basically be like, you're close with Ethel, you can pass on this message. And then she got angry at me for how I responded, which is just like, if you want to use me as your personal little owl, then don't get angry when I bite you. If you don't want to get bitten by the owl, then do your own fucking postal. But yeah, she regurgitated the exact same bad faith arguments that we debunked earlier in stream, like almost word for word. So I explained, listen, these don't make sense. You say we should censor the child's face, it won't make a difference. Like this isn't even a thing of these arguments are not sufficient, or we have to make some sacrifices in this situation. But some of these arguments straight up did not change anything at all. Some of this advice, some of this you have to do this, did not change anything at all. And I explained that. And instead of taking 2 seconds to reflect and be like, you know what? This thing I'm demanding is completely ridiculous and won't change anything. And I need to examine why I feel like it needs to be done when it demonstrably won't do anything. she complained that she hasn't derailed anything when that's literally by definition what she did, and also not what I said. And then a couple of days later, when like I got over some of the gaslighting, I came back to try and see if I could explain this to Chrissy and get her to understand it. And also just because I kind of needed to speak out against what had been said just for my own mental health. I couldn't just let things sit there like that. And I pointed out the double standard in whining that the parents would be horrified by Ethel including the reference image in the thread exposing the pedophile that hurt the child, but not thinking the parents would be horrified about someone defending the pedophile who made the pornography and downplaying the whole situation. It's a very interesting double standard. The parents have to deal with people making excuses for their child being abused, but the parents not allowed to. The parents should not have to, deal with someone speaking out about it. Very interesting double standard, by which I mean absolutely fucking disgusting, absolutely unacceptable.
Some people, others might be interested in is Quinto Bean. That's at Quinto Bean. So Airly, Simp Girl Rights, was one of the people who made this argument, along with Teresa Dua. They're two very popular trans people. I know some of you might be following them, so but yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to note these.
Yeah.
So people can, yeah.
Completely fine. I kind of need a lip breather anyway. But yeah, so in response to this, and like I should note, I don't like to bring it up too much because I worry that people will use the argument in bad faith to like cover up their horrible behavior and try and escape accountability. I worry a lot about ageism, but I should note that I'm only 22 years old, right? I've been through a lot of traumatic experiences. I've been through a lot of neglect. I'm disabled as well. I'm very new to this whole thing. I'm the sort of person where I feel like I should maybe get a little bit of leeway and a little bit of support in certain situations online. I mean, like, yeah, I did sign up to this. I'm not saying you have to, but like, it would be nice if people did take into account that I'm very young and very inexperienced and I have a lot of catching up to do. And for all that I'm working hard to do that, it is difficult. None of this was taken into account when I tried to explain the situation, where I said, this rhetoric doesn't make sense. There's double standards here. Instead of reflecting, instead of being the adult in the situation, Christiosity is a fucking parent, by the way. Instead of being the adult in the situation, giving this young CSA survivor some leeway when he is very clearly triggered and upset, her response was to say, maybe you should fuck off at this point, seriously. Once again, making the situation about herself and how offended she feels. And then she said that she didn't criticize Ethel, but, quote, said she did what she had to do, but should maybe consider ways of modifying the picture going forward, which is just a straight up lie. Saying that someone has to change their behavior is criticism. That's just what the word means. And Chrissy didn't say, in the future, it would be nice if Ethel blurred the face. In the future, it would be nice if Ethel considered alternatives to taking the image down. No, she said Ethel needs to do this, Ethel needs to do that. This is not about future behavior, this is about present behavior. So she just fucking straight up lied to me. So, in other words, I, as someone who has CSA Survivor in my Twitter bio for reasons like this, I approached Chrissy on Twitter to tell her she was following a pedophile apologist because it made me uncomfortable. She made excuses for that pedophile apologist. She approached me unprompted to criticize someone I work with, implying that we deserve less support and leeway than a pedophile apologist. She derailed the discussion using the exact same arguments as the pedophile apologist. She made the discussion about the well-being of the parents, not the children, to a CSA survivor. She whined about her feelings of offense and gaslighted me when I called her out. And then she told me to fuck off when I held her accountable for making excuses for a pedophile apologist. This wasn't just unpleasant. It was traumatizing. I was physically in shock. I can't remember if it was just for the rest of the day or for the next few days as well. I was physically in shock for this. It was traumatizing. And for several days, I was just thinking, this is someone I thought could be trusted. This is someone who I thought did the right thing. She made a big show. She said, I'm someone who always does what I think is right. And if you don't like that, and it really did strike me, because I know people don't take these things seriously. And I know a lot of people would rather make excuses than do the right thing. That didn't surprise me. But I thought that at least some people on the left were better than that. And I found out that there are some people who are better than that, but there are a lot of people who I thought I could trust who are not. And worse, when they do these horrible things, they will get away with it, and the situation will be talked about as if it's the CSA survivors who are the violent ones, who are out of line. Like, this whole time, I felt like I was so out of line every time I called someone out. It is a really difficult, stressful, traumatizing situation. It just... for all this hand-wringing over the possibility of causing harm, that's what this whole thing is about. We can't even let one child be possibly hurt in the future. These people are perfectly happy to inflict massive amounts of completely unnecessary harm when it comes to their delicate little feelings. Even if Chrissy had responded with the exact same apologetics, the exact same double standards, the exact same gaslighting, she would have cut the amount of harm done to me in half if, instead of telling me to fuck off, she had simply blocked me. There was no need to tell me to fuck off. If she wanted me to stop calling her out, the easiest solution to that would have been blocking me. Because you know what? When I saw those horrible messages, the first thing I did was I sent a response and then I blocked her. If she actually wanted me to leave her alone, she should have blocked me. That is what the block button is there for. But she did not do that. Why? Because she didn't want me to stop criticizing her. She wanted to lash out at me. She could give, not cursed, leeway for being triggered and upset. But when a young CSA survivor who was very obviously triggered and upset inflicted even a fraction of that level of hurt onto her in self-defense, that necessitated a violent response. These people do not care about harm. I've observed throughout this whole situation, from the initial discussion in the essence of community Discord to the present day, that there is very little consideration for the support, very little consideration and support for the well-being of abused children, and after that, CSA survivors. And there's a lot of concern about how, I'm concerned about this community I like. I'm concerned about this thing that I do that people might think is bad because of this. There are a lot of people complaining about how trans women are going to be negatively impacted like this. And I sympathize, really, I do. But they were putting that before the children who are at risk, including trans women, children, including other trans girls, and just all this selfishness. I do just need to clarify, because I'm criticizing people for being selfish and making this about themselves, and I did talk about my own experiences and how much this has hurt me. I do want to draw a very careful distinction between making the situation itself, the situation of Sophie Labelle sexually abusing children, about themselves, and talking about how you were impacted by the violent behavior of others in response to that situation. Mm-hmm. The violent and completely unnecessary backlash against people who are just trying to manage the situation in the best way possible.
There's a reason
there is a difference there.
There's a reason we started with the grooming and the survivors of CSA at the start and the impact this art has, and we've now led into the discourse and the fallout since. So that's why there's two distinct sections to this. So.
And also, before someone jumps in, like, oh, I was just talking about how your actions against me have harmed me. Yeah, fuck off. The only reason why we did anything to you in the first place is because you came after us. If you don't want bad things to happen to you, don't go after people. Saying you're following a pedophile apologist is not going after people. Saying you need to take down this important resource because I'm going to make up bullshit, that is going after people. Deal with it.
So, is that it done?
Yeah, that's the end of my notes. It's going to be fun trying to get through the rest of the stream. I have no idea what's going on. I have not had time to read through anything, even though I said I would.
Okay. Well,
I overslept so much today.
Okay. Well, the next story in our thing today is more than 147 anti-LGBT plus bills flood US legislation. So this was taken from a story that's something that was published on the 9th of March. I think it was actually a thread, not a story, if I remember correctly. Yes, it was a thread. Posted by the Human Rights Campaign. They announced that they were tracking, 147 individual bills that were active, or active as in they were trying to be passed, around the US. 73 of which were explicitly anti-trans, that is, they were targeting the trans community. Just as a note, 37 of the bills were aimed at banning trans kids from playing sport, 25 bills were aimed at limiting medical care for transgender people, and 22 bills allowed discrimination under the guise of religious freedom. These have just completely swamped various states. And among them was a particularly cruel bill from Minnesota, namely HF 1657, which would criminalize trans girls in school. The bill would make trans girls playing on girls' teams a petty misdemeanor, whilst using restrooms and locker rooms corresponding to their gender a misdemeanor. Now, for adults, these acts would carry a $300 fine and a $1,000 fine with 90 days behind bars, respectively. However, that doesn't apply to minors because these would be minors, they're school. But, and to quote an article on the matter, Megan Peterson, director of Minnesota civil rights organization Gender Justice, said those penalties could translate to a juvenile detention stay for minors found guilty of violating HF 1657. Though she does note that this is unlikely, there is still that potential. So these bills could result in trans girls literally being sent to juvie just for living as their gender. Again, these are just completely swamps the US. There's no way to go through 147 bills on this show, especially not at this moment. But I urge you, if you're in the US, please check your state, check what's going through, see how you can get involved. And the bigots are just trying to pass so many of these things just to effectively legislate trans people out of the public sphere. That's what they're trying to do. Peterson also notes the facts that, to quote, a proposal like HF 1657 would only serve to further fuel the school-to-prison pipeline, particularly for trans youth of colour. And that, again, there's the intersection here between being trans and trans person of colour. Just it being a misdemeanor, going on your record, even if it's only whilst you're a youth, if something else happens whilst you're a youth, you get involved with other things, that can escalate. And what's more is, if you go to juvie and you get in caught in that system, we know that the prison system, especially in the US, is practically a revolving door. It spits you out, and then because you are penalized in so many different ways, it just forces you back in, and it spits you out and forces you back in. So it's absolutely horrific, this constant attack on the trans community, and really, there's not a lot I can really tell you to do except try to have a look at what is happening on the state level, wherever you are. Try to raise your voice, try to be heard, call whoever you can, tell them that like this is all ridiculous. Peterson notes that in relation to this Minnesota bill in particular, nobody was asking for this at all. It wasn't an issue until someone on the school board literally asked, do we know if we have any trans students? And they responded, yes, they had a trans student who wanted to use the male changing rooms. So they were assigned female at birth. They're not even the one being targeted by this bill. But because they got a trans person, now we got to pass the bill that targets trans women. It's really just a fucking depressing state of affairs in the US right now. I'd also like to say if you're a trans person in the state, do self-care. Take care of yourself, make sure that you're doing things to keep your head above water sort of thing. And you're not forgotten, you're not unnoticed, but honestly, they just seem to be flooding the system. So there's so much that it's difficult to focus on any one thing. It's just I had to do this Minnesota bill because if passed, it would be the first of these bills to actually accompany such actions with prison time. Because normally it was just penalties or rulings that you're not allowed to use these changing rooms. This one actually carries with it the potential for juvenile incarceration. Do try to keep track of that if you can. Otherwise, just take care of yourselves right now. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
If I did have any thoughts, they are out of my head now.
I'm sorry. Moving forward, I should probably just take a note. 30:59. Okay. That's probably better to 31 and after. Okay, the next story is, the US News spent a total of 54 minutes covering 44 trans murders in 2020. And I should note, those 44 murders are of gender non-conforming people just in the US alone. So we're not on about globally, there were 44 trans people murdered. Just in the US alone, 44 people were murdered, majority of which were murdered specifically because they were trans. And American news, so this is broadcast news, only spent a collective 54 minutes covering any of these stories across 23 news segments, according to Media Matters. Link to that in the transcript, the agenda. I should know it's called the Trans Agenda after all. It should also be noted that the vast majority of these the vast majority of these minutes was covered by NSNBC, who accounted for more than half the coverage at 31 minutes across 10 segments, so less than half in the segments, but more coverage extensively. It should also be noted that only 9 of these 23 total segments mentioned the name of the murdered trans person. So even when they do report, the vast majority of them don't even mention the name of the trans person, which is kind of a shocking fact because it makes it very difficult to empathize with that person. I don't create timestamps during the stream. I do it after, so if you could hold off on that. So anyway, it should also be noted that the one time Fox News covered the topic was when Tucker Carlson lied, asserting that the epidemic of anti-trans violence was, quote, factually untrue, end quote, and asserting that, quote, transgender people are, on average, safer than your typical American, end quote, which is a lie parroted by various different conservatives, including Blair White. I did a video response to Blair White recently on that. And just to clarify, Latino trans women are between 1.4 and 48 times more likely to be murdered than Latino cis women. And that 1.4 is accounting for the the highest trans population, and we have every incident recorded. So it's definitely going to be higher than 1.4, and potentially 48 times more likely. When it comes to black trans women, on the other hand, this number is between 2.35 times more likely and 74.9 times more likely. So like, it's a, oh sorry, I've just received a super chat from Shakira Miguel, $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Shakira. It is much appreciated. There was no message, however. If you didn't mean to write a message, you can always write a message on the side. I will try picking it up. The idea of trans people being safer is based on taking the largest trans sample, all of them are being reported, and only looking at white people. Because it is slightly different for white trans people. That does not actually mean that it is necessarily safer for them. There's a lot of underreporting when it comes to the murder of trans people, and there's various different reasons for this. One is the fact that very often they're posthumously erased. They're misgendered both in official documents and in the news. This report, which is, by the way, the only report on the topic, which is how I know this is the source Tucker Carlson is using, because it's the only one. The only way they could find out the numbers was based on the tracking of, I think it was either Human Rights Watch or the Human Rights Campaign mentioned earlier, one of these groups. Literally, they're reliant on news reports because the official documentation isn't equipped to actually tell us how many trans people die. So yeah, like, you have to assume some pretty favourable circumstances to make this argument, and it leaves out the picture that no matter what, trans women of colour are far more likely to be murdered than cis women of colour controlled sample. So you compare trans Latino women to cis Latino women, and trans black women to cis black women. So yeah, just want to make that clear. This whole thing, however, and the reason that it's important to note this, is there's this narrative that the trans conspiracy has control over the media, and yet when it comes to trans deaths, we're receiving next to none of the coverage, at least in the US. So again, it's completely odd at that. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, really?
Not that I can think of.
I'm sorry if we sound really tired. I did not expect that first section to take as long as it did. We probably should just focus on that one section, if I'm being honest. But yeah, that's kind of my fault.
I'm kind of surprised it was only that long, to be honest.
Okay.
I was exhausted when the stream started, so I'm definitely tired now.
Mm-hmm. Well, moving on, the next story is Exeter Gender Identity Clinic only assessed 2 new patients in 2020. And this is based on a Freedom of Information request made by, I believe it was a trans person, into the Laurel's Exeter Specialist Gender Identity Clinic here in the UK. And what that request revealed is that the service had only assessed 2 patients out of the 495 referred to them in 2020. Now, one thing I have to be absolutely clear on here, because there's been a lot of misreporting about this case, this number does not factor in those referred to the service prior the 1st of December, and how many of them are seen. So it could have been the service was full and those users are still using the service, only 2 free slots opened up, and those are the ones who were assessed. I do need to note that because again, like, different sites are reporting that the clinic overall only saw 2 people the entire year. That's not true. That's not what happened. It's still abysmal, don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying that, but there is a nuance there that's needed for clarity. They did not say how many people they actually saw with their service over the year. And again, it's still deeply disturbing, especially considering that there are 2,592 people waiting for their first appointment. The Freedom of Information request also noted that, quote, 14 have subsequently been discharged, end quote. And the thing is, what this means is not very clear. I'm not sure if this is 14 on top of the 2 that were seen, that have been seen and discharged, or if this is something else, like they've just left or whatever. It doesn't make that clear, so it could potentially be that they've assessed 16 people. Either way, still not good when they've had 495 referred to them. It certainly shows that there is this massive chasm between the gender services being offered by the NHS and the need for gender services in the UK. This is particularly bad considering the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic has effectively been shut down right now, especially when it comes to young people. So yeah, the whole thing is just going to hell. The report also disclosed that the current longest waiting time, and I'm saying current because it's probably going to get longer, for a first appointment is 2,092 days, or just shy of 6 years. Far higher than like the wait times that we've been seeing thrown around of, 3 to 4 years. So yeah, it's an incredibly troubling sight. That is not a train, that is a car. I'm surprised, I haven't heard the train today. The train does not say hi. The service responded to the Freedom of Information request, because they're allowed to do that, by stating that there's been a sharp rise in the referrals and that they've made several changes to try and meet new demand. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully this is just like a once-off wave of people joining because they're afraid like these services are vanishing or whatever, and they will like start processing from this year more of the new people as they get people through. But again, it's just a really scary. I just read a message that I just laughed at. That's really inappropriate there, a really inappropriate point. But yeah, it's a very scary time for everyone in the UK. And again, it just shows that the whole idea of the trans conspiracy controlling everything is completely bogus. Like, if that was the case, shit like this wouldn't happen. And I went to actually check the reviews for the clinic, because you can review clinics on Google. And there are people in the reviews talking about how they've literally just dropped off, decided to go private. And the reason that they're noting that they've actually dropped out is because they don't want to hold up anyone else that needs to use the service. It's kind of depressing that that's the state of thing, that some trans people are tapping out and taking other means just in hopes that other trans people can get these services when everyone should be able to get them on the fucking NHS. But yeah. This is from Shakira. Oh, a message, yes. Thanks to all of EOT, Udita, Levi, and Ethel. Thank you very much. Yeah. So thanks very much. And I can see the earlier post. If only it was all about foxes, which is reference, I believe, to a meme that I posted in Essence of Community shortly before we started. Oh. Did that just double the donation? Apparently we got another super chat. I do not know. Sometimes it repeats the super chat. Sometimes it shows up twice. I don't know why. But yes, so thank you. Either way. Yeah, I think it was just a repeat. Okay, thank you very much anyway. So yes. Okay, let's check the times. 43. Okay, so the next story is Graham Linehan is
hang
invited.
On. Just before we get to the next story, I do actually have something to say about this one.
Okay, sorry. Go on.
I just want to remind people, we're talking about how there's all these trans people who need the service, and very few people getting the service. It's very, very easy to feel like it's just think there are too many trans people. Like, even logically, we know there aren't that many trans people. It's easy to feel that way when we hear the story. So just want to remind everyone that trans people are like, what, less than 3% of the population, even with a very generous estimate. if we can meet the demand for things like, you know, knee surgery and nose jobs and penicillin and insert random medical whatever here, we can meet the demand for trans people.
Well, you say that, but
It's
this is the NHS that is currently being gutted by the government. But some services are being stripped back faster than others. And trans services have come under particular scrutiny, as we've seen with like the High Court case of Tavistock and everything like that. The attempts to block Gender GP, who I should just note is one of the people that kind of like misreported on this story, and because there's an economic incentive there for them, like Gender GP is a wonderful service and it's helping a lot of trans people get HRT in the UK, which they can't do from other places, but they are still ultimately a company, so usual warning of capitalism applies here.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying the gutting of the NHS has nothing to do with this, but I'm saying like when it comes to services that cannot meet the demand, and when it comes to like it would not be that hard to meet the demand of trans. I don't imagine it would be that hard to meet the demand for trans services compared to some services, which are of course much more numerous. I feel like with the explicit targeting of trans services, there is a bit of a targeting of trans services going on here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. There definitely is.
I think like the lawsuit tipped me off, and you know the thing with the prescriptions tipped me off. Just a very subtle targeting of trans services going on here.
Because they're not just going after like the public services, like the NHS. They're also going after the private to try and stop everything. Okay, so 45. The next story is Graham Linehan invited to speak at to speak about free speech at Parliament. Okay. So on the 4th of March, Pink News reported that former comedy writer turned professional transphobe Graham Linehan had been invited to speak on free speech by Parliament due to being banned from Twitter for violating terms of service, harassing both trans people and specifically cis women as well. Now, this is something that I have particular insight into, relating to a certain irony in how Graham Linehan is the same person that at the start of 2020 threatened me with lawsuit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation, or SLAP suit, because I criticised his behaviour and noted exactly what he was doing. He's the reason I had to fundraise £2,000 just in case he tries to sue me, and that money's still sitting there in case anyone else is threatened with a similar lawsuit by Graham or someone else in the UK. Well, not necessarily someone else in the UK, but it's yeah. So like, it's fucking ironic for this person to be invited to Parliament to talk about free speech and how it's being undermined, when they have a known history of weaponizing slap suits, not just against me, but against Pink News, Hemant Mehta from the atheist community. Like, they are known for this. They are infamous for it. And the same for J.K. Rowling, who, of course, made an appearance in his testimony. It's funny how one of the pieces of evidence that Graham brings up and he laments about is how Pink News ran 42 articles on J.K. Rowling in targeting trans people over a week. And it's like, so your problem here is Pink News having free speech. Like, literally, his argument for how free speech is being cordoned in the UK is a newspaper line full of queer people coming out and publicly criticising J.K. Rowling for being transphobic. And he genuinely thought that was a decent argument. Again, J.K. Rowling...
Don't you get it, though? It's only free speech when it's speech that I like.
Free speech for me, censorship for everyone else. And, you know, on top of this, he never stops to reflect the fact that the reason he got banned from Twitter is because he was logged in 16 hours a day, harassing trans people, especially trans women, and cis women. He loved to harass cis women. Any cis woman that disagreed with him, he loved to harass. We're not talking about, like, generally disagreeing. We're talking about actual targeted fucking harassment. Sending his followers at them, attacking their physical appearance, trying to erase their identity, telling bisexual people that they're not really queer, etc. You know, all this sick shit he was doing. That's perfectly fine. 16 hours of that a day for years, perfectly fine. An entire queer organization doing 42 articles covering an unfolding story, because when J.K. Rowling came out, it wasn't just the one thing. Over the next few days, it was like a chain reaction of not just J.K. Rowling, but everyone she's associated with coming out and saying different things. When Daniel Radcliffe came out, said something, that was another article, that includes J.K. Rowling. When Emma Watson comes out, talks on the matter, again, another article about J.K. Rowling. There was discussions about, like, fantasy, Fantastic Beasts and where to find them and how that's impacted and people were boycotting it. There was discussions about the game that's still in development. You know, all this shit going on. Then people went back and checked her other work. Here are, like, problematic stuff with the goblins, etc. Oh, let's talk about her Striker series, you know, the Silkworm and everything like that. You know, there was a lot of facets to that when she came out as a when she went full mask off about her bigotry. There were so many things to talk about. 42
there's
articles.
that, but it sounds a lot like the articles weren't just about, you know, her and talking about how horrible she is, but also talking about, like, the cultural impact of things and her work. And, like, it wasn't just sitting there on a Twitter account yelling at someone saying that they're all these horrible things.
Usually, like, Graham Linehan loved to just go around screaming beard at trans people, which is funny.
Yeah.
Like, he did it a couple of times to, like, cis women. It was just like, way to go in proving that you're such like a horrible little man. Sorry.
And, like, the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is this is like a professional publication, and I'm not an expert on this. I've just been researching this in my own time, but, like, I have been reading through the standards about this, and when it comes to publications, they have guidelines not just for, you know, spelling and punctuation and stuff like that, but there are ethical guidelines and stuff that they have to follow, and there are content guidelines. You can't just write whatever you want. It goes through an editor and all sorts of things. And, you know, it doesn't mean it's perfect. I've called out plenty of professional publications for being fucking disgusting before. But, like, it's not Graham Linehan sitting there on a Twitter account screaming at women. It's not directed at specific people most of the time. It goes through an editor. There are ethical guidelines. Like, it is very much the pot calling the cutlery black here. Graham, this is not. You do so much worse than this.
Just a quick disclaimer. The Daily Fail is not a newspaper, therefore these ethical guidelines need not apply. Another big irony, of course, as is Graham Linehan's go-to argument, is the fact that he kept presenting trans people, specifically trans women, as dangerous, particularly to lesbians. What this left out is the fact that, as mentioned and even discussed in the last show, Graham Linehan has a long history of targeting, women, including lesbians. Last show we mentioned a story about Graham Linehan going on to the lesbian dating app Her, and, like, creating a fake profile trying to parody trans people. When he created the first one, nobody said anything, so, like, he photoshopped, like, cat ears and, like, stickers, like, sexual stickers and stuff, and, like, to try and make the outrage that he wasn't quite clearly provoking. But here's the thing, I mentioned, like, how scary is it to be on that platform. Like, you could just have your profile screenshot and posted by Graham Linehan. I didn't know at the time Graham Linehan had done that. he had a article of screenshots of people he believes to be trans, saying these are not lesbians, and he just has, I think I actually wrote down the number, yes, 20 of the app's service users, all of which are welcome on the service by her's own thing, by her's own statement. He posted screenshots of them, of their profiles. He's endangering lesbians. He is the danger. Again and again, he proves it. He is the danger. But no one cares about that. So, yeah, I don't know if you've really got anything to add to this story.
All I can really say is that this is appalling behavior from the king of the lesbians. He ought to treat his subjects better.
But, as just kind of like icing on the cake, there'd been like a lot of speculation about why Graham's wife had left him. He came out and admitted the facts that, yes, she fucking booted his ass because of his transphobic shtick. For those who don't know, a couple of years into things, Graham Linehan's wife left him. There was also an incident in which he actually forgot he had children, which is kind of an interesting thing. But yeah, like, he tries to soften it, but it's quite clear she just could not fucking put up with his shtick anymore. He was becoming too obsessive. So yeah, his wife got out. His wife did the smart thing. Sorry, just blow my nose. Okay. And I believe that is the end of the stories. Oh, no, wait, there's one story, the positive story. Yes, I forgot. This has been added right at the end. This got added, like, just before the show, because I was like, hey, I would like something positive. The next story is, of course, cis woman wins North Carolina Wrestling State Championship. So, Heaven Fitch, female wrestler, became the first woman to win the North Carolina High School Athletic Association Individual Wrestling State Championship. That is a hell of a phrase to say. Specifically in the 106-pound weight class. Ending her season with 54-5, I believe that is wins to losses, record. Winning her the Most Outstanding Wrestler Award. Not too much to say here, but as we all know, an individual case like this means that now cis women are the strongest threat on earth. We have to ban cis women from everything. Of course, I'm being facetious here. But it is interesting, like, all those people like, oh, you know, cis women can never be, like, male athletes, etc. It's like, she just did, okay? I just wanted to share that because I've been seeing a lot of trans people sharing that story. So yeah, it's just like, does it mean anything in the big picture? Not really, because, like, again, they've never shown evidence that trans women are a danger to sport, so I don't have to prove that they're not a danger to sport. And
it's just very fun to turn their own arguments back on them.
Yeah, because it goes back to, like, the whole Stephen Woods thing, and the fact that in his first video he referenced multiple cases, like specific cases, and, like, he presented that, oh, this is in a sport. I looked into them. A lot of them were not what he claimed. For example, there was a female wrestler he talked about, and she'd only set records for the specific wrestling league, weightlifting league she was in. She hadn't even set, like, weight category across the board, just that one league. Apparently that was the end of women's sports. It's like, no, actually, cis women have done better than her in, like, across all leagues, sort of thing. She's only the highest in this one specific league, because there are multiple weightlifting leagues. So that was funny. And then, like, in my response, I pointed all this out. And then in his response, he was like, oh, well, Ethel just used, like, case studies and anecdotes. It's like, the only cases I ever brought up were the ones you brought up. I turned them back on you. It's just... They should make sports and athletics based on skill, not gender. No. Like, just because as trans women are entering it, like, you take it away, that kind of, like, shows something. I strongly disagree with that.
It's like how people were responding to the push for
marriage equality or
same-sex marriage with like,
get rid of marriage.
oh, we should just get rid of marriage. It's like, no, can you at least give them a few damn years? No, you can't. Especially because culturally, when things are really ingrained, trying to dismantle them is hard in the first place, but also just overhauling everything the moment someone different shows up, it really is just...
Yeah, especially as
it's
if you did that, it's just going to be used as an excuse to exclude all women, both cis and trans, as they're not going to get sponsorship. It's difficult enough to get people to appreciate women's sports. You look at people talk about, like, you've got, football and women's football. You don't say male football and women's football. You say football and women's football. It's very hard to have them both taken serious. To have women's football taken seriously, and same for other sports. So yeah, I that's not a good idea. That's a bad idea. Parading around is a good idea. It sounds like it sounds very intuitional, and it sounds like very pleasant. But given like the social context, no. Let's at least get to a
problem,
point.
I think.
Sorry.
Problem I think is partly that when it comes to these very complex problems, we'll come up with solutions that seem very good on paper. Oh, let's just change everything, but it's not that simple in the real world. Even if it were a good idea to work towards that, there are so many things you need to change. In the interim, we need a solution, and that interim is to just include trans people in as the gender that we are.
And as Linda notes, like a load of people are just going to turn around and say, trans people have literally destroyed sports. In the same way that schools using language inclusive of not just mother and father, but parent, guardian, caregiver, etc., is being framed as the trans people have destroyed gendered language. And it's like, no, this policy predates like the current trans movement. This shit is about people who have been adopted, people who are cared by grandparents, uncles, aunts, etc. Also people who belong to same gender households. This is about including them. This is already a thing. But they're making out that like trans people have come along and destroyed this language now. Yeah.
There's criticism that's been brought up of a lot of non-binary people don't identify as men or women, and so having to go into one or the other is not good. And
we can restructure sports, and I'm like absolutely open for like more weight categorization. I'm open to opening like specifically non-binary or even open
mixed divisions.
You can have
we need more
unisex divisions whilst also having the gender sports as well. Like that happens.
We need more mixed divisions in general as well, because there are a lot of sports that are segregated when it's not necessary. Like for example, Olympic shooting. There's no reason to segregate that. You don't need to be physically strong for that, but it is segregated anyway. So,
but the idea of just
in general,
what's that? Go on.
Yeah, in general, we do need more mixed sports, but also including non-binary people is a really good reason to do that. But it's way easier to have mixed divisions than it is to try and remove gender from sport altogether.
Like, there are little ways you can do these things, so, yeah. Anything else you'd like to say?
Well, in terms of positive stories, I was just sent a positive story a few minutes ago. Hang on, I just need to read these messages. In Rochester, in the United States, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, a black trans woman who's worked in LGBT clinics for years is currently running for mayor. Her name is Javannah Jasmeen. If anyone lives in Rochester and wants to keep an eye on that, or just wants to look into it in general.
Okay.
I think that's really cool, and good luck to Javannah.
Yes. Hopefully they're not just a liberal puppet. They're just another one of those liberal puppets. But yeah.
Highly doubt it. Highly doubt it, given my source. I should have probably mentioned this was a message from a friend who's one of our very leftist friends.
Okay.
Yeah, didn't give the name because I wasn't told. Like, use my name on the stream.
But yeah,
Okay.
Okay. So moving
No,
on.
I must drag out your mistakes for as long as I can.
Can we move on, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Moving on, we have the last thing, which is a discussion. We're going to try keeping this short. About previous video, which was let's discuss ContraPoints open worship of domestic abuser Buck Angel. Hopefully, if you're watching this section, you kind of know about this. Before I actually get to this, I should probably just note, those who just arrived or just leaving, we do not monetize videos or streams on the channel anymore. So our only income is via Patreon or Super Chats. So if you'd like to support the channel, please do think about supporting us that way. It's a really big help, even if it's only $1, $2 donations, etc. It really does go a long way to helping us. So we really can't understate just how important that sort of thing is to us. On that note, I'd also like to just thank the following patron sponsors who have been giving to us for a long time: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovac, Ryan Katie, Gert Van Voorst, Steve Corbin, Sosh Daniels, and Justin Allen. Your support is always appreciated. Okay, but back to the video. I remember being like shit scared nervous when this was going out, because it's like criticizing Natalie. You know, she has managed to construct a rather toxic fan base around her. So we were always a bit worried that, like, how was this going to react? Are people going to blow things up, etc.? I felt the need to return to the topic again because previous response to our video cancelling it'd been very rushed, and in the rush I thought I need to touch on this, I need to touch on that, I need to touch on that. Everything was just sort of thrown out there, and I kind of lost sight of what was really important, namely the way in which Natalie not only openly defends, but openly worships Buck Angel, who is a domestic abuser, having abused his ex-wife Karen Winslow, now married to Lana Wachowski. And one of the ways he did this, besides sharing intimate details about Karen's sex work at the time, was by outing Lana Wachowski as trans. To be clear, Lana was at the time denying both claims that she was on HRT and that she was cross-dressing. So, you know, it wasn't just, oh, they were denying claims about cross-dressing. There was the HRT aspect as well. And Buck Angel came out, outed her on that, all as a means of hurting his ex-wife. Did you see much of the response to that, Levi? Levi?
Can't actually remember. I could look up the video and check, but I can't remember because I just had to get all the notes done for the first section and damn everything else.
I'm sorry.
I can't even remember making that video anymore.
I'm sorry. Yeah, like the response from most people was generally good. Like they understood the reason for remaking the video, etc. However, there were a few people that were, as per usual, doing the normal tone policing and stuff like that. One of them in particular was user Oliver Maynard, who posted a series of comments that I did not allow through because they were quite clearly bad faith. I'll just read through them, go through them here, because I didn't want to leave them all dispersed on the video, because one thing that can happen is if enough people repeat a lie on a video and that video isn't being moderated, people, when they often go to a new video that they might disagree with, scroll down to the comments, see if they can find like a general consensus in the comments, and then leave. So it's like, I'm kind of cautious of that, especially when bad faith is involved. Olivia started by stating that, quote, "I don't like Buck Angel and like Natalie. Perhaps this video is hurtful to trans as you claim she is. Why so much infighting?" End quote. Okay, let's respond to this. First of all, there is no infighting. Infighting would suggest we're part of the same group. Yes, we both share the attribute that we are trans, but I am a non-binary trans person, she is a binary trans woman. However, beyond that, like, we're not part of the same group. This isn't infighting. I am criticizing, as a survivor of domestic abuse, her behavior in defending and worshipping a domestic abuser. So immediately, it was quite clear that this person was being disingenuous. As for the harm my video apparently caused the trans community, again, this is just based purely on respectability politics. Respectability politics and assimilationism can go fuck off. But yeah. Then she came back with, I take issue with with your claim of being abused to attack Natalie. Getting outed by a bitter divorce and cheating scandal isn't the same as being demeaned and hit and manipulation in a place one can't escape. Nuance, please, nuance, please, and you need as much sensitivity as others. I have this same issue with Blair White, who covers her own content with the I was abused line. Using abuse cynically and politically isn't right, in my honest opinion. I talk about my abuse only to talk about how abuse itself is bad. Okay, but the thing is, I'm talking about abuse and how it is bad. Also, one thing I discussed in the video is the fact that Buck Angel didn't out Lana Wachowski immediately. He outed her 3 years later, and first of all, the story in Rolling Stones, Buck doesn't say Karen cheated on him. He says she came and told him that she had fallen in love with Lana. The whole, they're having an affair later, that they're having an affair seems to have been a thing that he added later on. So that I found really interesting. So anyway, they separated in 2003. He outed Lana Wachowski whilst V for Vendetta was coming out in 2006. Let's say they had cheated anyway, hypothetically. That would still not justify abuse. Domestic abuse is still abuse even if one of the partners has cheated. In fact, many abuse victims cheat as a means of getting out of abusive situations. That's why I put focus on the change of Karen's health, because if you notice, Karen's friend, I forgot her name, but she noticed the fact that when Karen got away from Buck Angel, her mental and physical health improved immeasurably. She was eating well, exercising, living life, feeling good in general. That to me suggests that this was a fully abusive situation long before he ever outed Lana. So it wasn't just a case of the outing is the only abuse, and along with what else I go on to discuss later in the video in the article from 2014, where Buck Angel tries to assert that he owns Karen by asserting her sex worker name, which she worked under him as he was kind of the manager at the time. Asserting her sex worker name was her real name, erasing her personal identity in the process. So the nuance there comes in the fact that Buck Angel outed Lana 3 years after the divorce. So I'm the one actually including the nuance there. As for the idea that Blair White covers for her content with the I was abused line, I never covered for my content with the I was abused line. I'm talking about the issue as it impacts me because I was abused. It's a fact that matters to me. I get hurt when abusers are defended and held up as paragons of almost divinity. They're divine trans people. That fucking sucks, okay? To be in an abuse culture where you can do awful fucking shit and you'll still be praised for it, that is a terrible thing. As for how you could talk about abuse to show that abuse is bad without, while silencing others who are talking out about abuse, I don't fucking care. Next comment came up.
It's interesting.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, it's just interesting how, Buck can do these horrible, terrible things, very publicly abuse his ex-wife, but you criticize that and you get painted as an abuser. But he's fine, but you criticize that and you're painted as an abuser, using your abuse as an excuse to cover up your behavior. It is peak abuse culture where just there's a constant reversal of victims and offenders. It's
Yeah.
constant.
You're calling out my behavior hurts me, then my behavior ever hurt you. Olivia then went on to add that, quote, Buck Angel is absolutely trash. Natalie just isn't. Natalie seems like an intelligent, kind, and actually vulnerable person. Buck can play her like he plays others. I don't see Natalie in the sinister way you do. I feel for her. As a trans woman who has been very abused and lived in repeating cycles of abuse, I struggle to escape. I have a different take. I think this topic could have been covered in a kinder way. She is not being played by him. She is playing everyone else. The big example I go to is the alcohol shown throughout her video cancelling. People love to go, well, Natalie has substance abuse problems. Don't you see all the alcohol in her video cancelling? It's like, yeah, that's not just coincidental. She sat down as a creative mind and went, I should have different types of alcohol in each section of this video. Because why? Well, it'll make people think that the alcoholism defense is justified. It is like when a Hollywood star is caught being a domestic abuser or is caught having slept around. The very often defense is, oh, I was on substance, I was doing drugs, I was drinking alcohol. They go to rehab and then all is forgiven. It is the same defense.
Also, remember, and no, that's fine. Yeah, people are saying the alcoholism point, and that's a good point. But even more explicitly, we know that Natalie is not a kind person because she has an entire video dedicated to mocking that trans woman who had a meltdown from being misgendered. Like, that's not a kind thing to do, making an entire feature-length film.
I believe it was cringe.
Cinematic. Yeah, with like set design and costuming to mock a trans woman who had a meltdown after a bad day. That's not compassion. That's not kindness. That it's intelligence, but it's the cold, calculating intelligence of a fucking predator. It's not the intelligence. Fucking disgusting.
And another thing is, alcoholism isn't a defense against domestic abuse, and it's certainly not a defense against the hero worship of domestic abusers. So, it really, she is not a kind person. A kind person would actually listen and engage with people. She didn't. You look at her response to the criticism she'd received for repeated MB-phobia before. She never actually addresses the issue. She kind of goes, yeah, I had a middle-aged moment, that's it. That's not empathy. That's not exploration. That's not apologizing. That's not fixing the harm done. That is just the bare minimum. That's saying what you think people want you to say to get off. Fact is, I'm going to go a little bit ahead here because Olivia returned with the posting of my most recent video. For those that don't know, my most recent video is, of course, the one about Xander Hull, titled, Xander Hull Still Abuses Victims of Domestic Violence for Profit. And she had a few words to say there. What she said was, quote, I'm not going to watch. I just hope you don't use these topics cynically and understand the severity of the nature of the claims. I have just seen a lot of abuse as topic titles from you. Childhood abuse is a serious and triggering topic. End quote. No shit. That is why I spend the most part of that video discussing the harm Xander Hull inflicted upon me, whilst trying to exploit my history as a survivor of domestic abuse to argue that, because of the cycle of violence, I must be an abuser as well. Like, this sort of disgusting approach really is just defining of Natalie, Xander Hull, their supporters, the whole breadtube scene at this point. And that's why I get posted to breadtube places like, why? I do not associate with this anymore. It's so fucking disgusting. And the idea is, oh, you use abuse in your titles a lot. Well, yeah. It's almost like we live in an abuse culture, and I'm fucking tired of it.
It's interesting because like there are YouTube channels out there that talk about abuse exclusively, that purport to be able to explain narcissism or whatever. And I don't think people tend to spend a whole lot of time criticizing those channels for talking about abuse. But then when you do it, it's suddenly a problem. Like talking about abuse a lot isn't necessarily a problem. Generally, it's because someone understands abuse or thinks they have something to say about the topic that would be helpful. This never happens for any other topic. Oh, you talk about trans people a lot. Did you know that being trans is an important thing? Trans people, their identities are very important to them. You better not be trivializing it. Like, at least watch the fucking video first. Jeez.
It is quite disgusting. Another response that I didn't live through because, again, it is just loaded with shit, was one by Violet Luston, which stated that, quote, and this is quite a long one, quote, "Just curious, what would Natalie need to do to stop being bad now in your eyes? As best as I can see, she's not standing Buck since the video, and even though you do not show it, she admits to doubt about his character in the video, but decides not to condemn him. She needs to condemn Buck, and then what does she need to apologize for now? She has always shown MB allyship, so she just needs to prove it somehow? How? How could you be sure she means it?" End quote. It continues, but I'm going to do it bit by bit. She's done nothing to repair the damage and the legitimacy she's lended Buck. Her fans are still lying about the whole Buck Angel situation, which is lying about Buck Angel's domestic abuse and terraforming the trans community for abusers. She has not always shown MB allyship. She's shown MB exploitation. We were a useful shield before she came out as a trans woman, but the moment she lost a use for us, suddenly we got ejected. Again, in my video, I start by pointing out that there had been repeated instances of MB phobia, completely ignored. This is why, again, this comment is not getting through, because it's quite clearly not actually looking to address the arguments I made. It's looking to create a narrative in the comments, so people turning up to the video, scroll down to the comments, find a comment that agrees with them, go, okay, I can ignore the video and leave. That's what's happening here. I know they do this. So anyway, as for what Natalie can do at this point, I'm just going to be honest, I don't think she fucking can do anything. Like, she defended a domestic abuser, and then she sat on it for a year, and she's gone ahead and she's internalized his rhetoric. The bit where she gushes and worships him and exactly what I needed to hear, and I told him, I love you because Senpai noticed me, her own fucking words, on that Senpai, by the way. She's done all that. She sat on it, she's internalized his rhetoric, started propagating his rhetoric as theory. We'll get to that in the video on Luxembourg and how his rhetoric, designed to gaslight his victims and the people that don't like him, has been appropriated and transformed into Natalie's video on J.K. Rowling. She can't come back at this point. She's gone over the moral horizon in this regard. She's just going to have to close her account.
There's only so many times.
Okay?
There's only so many times you can intentionally hurt people for no reason except that it's profitable for you before you just can't come back for it. It's almost like hurting people on purpose is bad and you can't always be forgiven for it.
It's like Blair White. Blair White needs to fuck off. Like she will inevitably come over and probably do, oh, I'm no longer on the right sort of shit. I mean, she's already kind of done parts of that, but no, she needs to fuck off. They all do.
We really need to normalize people online.
Redemption as a concept is purely on a personal level, so you can start feeling better. At least I've tried to fix things. It is not about keeping your position. You are not Emperor Hirohito, okay? Really obscure reference there. Those who don't know, Emperor Hirohito was the Emperor of Japan who led the massacre in China and elsewhere, pleasure women in Korea, etc. All these horrific war fucking crimes. But because they needed an ally in the East, they decided to allow him to keep his position. He was the only main Axis power that was allowed to keep his position. That's not what it's about. Redemption is you fixing yourself, not keeping your fucking platform, profit, income, whatever. That shit goes. You have shown you cannot be trusted, because just as easily as you've come to know things are right, you can fucking go back the other way, okay? So no. You apologize, you leave. Okay, sorry.
I really think that we need to normalize the idea of people losing their platforms online.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have a right to be able to be on the internet and like use the internet, like in a perfect world, maybe not the right to be on it, but like just because you have the right to use the internet, just because no one can technically force you to get off of your platform, doesn't mean you should have the right to a platform just because you managed to cultivate one. There's not much we can do in terms of oversight online, since, you know, people who are doing this are just people with internet connections. Al and I are just people with internet connections. There's not much oversight you can have there.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we going to do about that? Well, we need some accountability. We need to have a thing where if people are not going to be responsible with their platforms, they lose their platforms.
Anyway.
I also need to add that it's like it's just so soul crushing to repeatedly see people 10, 20 years older than me who cannot be as responsible with like literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of or tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, you know, cannot be as responsible as me, a guy with an internet connection. Like, what is the world coming to?
Anyway, moving forward, they they try to like buy my allyship. I don't know. They're trying to buy me here by going, quote, FYI, I'm not a fan of Buck Angel. Personally, his defense of Abigail Shrier was too awful. To me, he is an interesting figure, but a highly irresponsible, self-righteous one. I also agree the Lana outing was really disgusting behaviour, end quote. Notice, I can condemn Buck Angel for his defense of Abigail Shrier, but I'm not allowed to, I'm not allowed to take issue with Natalie defending and promoting, worshipping a fucking domestic abuser. So, you know, again, really disgusting defense. They very often throw Buck out and say, I still agree with Natalie. No, you can't do that. Natalie and Buck like that now, okay? They are like that. So they're intertwined. Their fates are intertwined. She fucking defended a domestic abuser. Fuck it. She knew he was a domestic abuser as well. She knew what was in the article. There is no fucking way she didn't read it, because she would not have gone through the effort of doing that emotional setup of like eBay and Spanish translation. Oh, let's look over there. You bad people invading Buck Angel's privacy in a public interview. You know, she knew what was fucking in that article. She knew what Buck Angel is. And she chose to defend and hero worship him anyway. Those two are chained together now. Anything you want to add to that? Sorry.
No, I did just remember the Twitter thing. I don't know if you want to talk about that at some point.
Let's just do this. Moving forward. Quote, to me, Natalie Wynn is a trans woman in pain. She, as she has also acknowledged multiple times, expressed how her own pain is irresponsible and hurtful. Expressed her own pain in irresponsible and hurtful ways, but I can relate to this so much in my transition. I constantly find myself checking my own judgment of other trans people as I go through this grueling process. I am struggling with using my own self-judgment on others. My own pain hurt others. To me, this is what Natalie saw in Buck's Instagram post, a reflection that speaks to what she was emotionally going through. Also, in context, when she brings up that post up, it does not come over as her saying, look at my favourite Buck post, but her literally recounting her emotional state in a moment in time, a vulnerable moment, end quote. You are responsible for the damage you cause. You are responsible for your actions. I don't know why that needs saying. Also, she was quite clear. It was hero worship. It was gushing. It was senpai noticed me. Her own fucking words. Like, she could have talked about it differently to that, but she didn't. She chose to fucking glorify a domestic abuser. This is just flat out denial of what was shown. Don't know if you want to add anything else.
Not really.
It also, like, yeah. Moving forward, quote, also, Natalie has been open about her substance abuse problems during the period she is being accused of causing harm here. That does not mean her actions are without responsibility, but please consider that she was very likely not in a good mindset at all when doing a lot of this. I say this to perhaps judge her going forward as opposed to her past, since she is working on ending her medication addiction and improving her relationship with alcohol. She also has self-reflected on her intentions and need to heal wounds in the trans community, for example with Dr. K of Healthy Gamer, end quote. Then fucking remove her from the situation. If she needs to heal because she can't stop hurting people, remove her from the situation, at least until she is ready. She didn't do that. She spent the year doubling down, continuing the same fucking violence, continuing to defend her actions and defending Buck Angel and worshipping him. So yeah, like this is complete nonsense. I don't give a fucking shit about her substance abuse. If it doesn't absolve her of responsibility, then why the fuck are you bringing it up? You know, she is not owed the platform. She's not owed anything. But she's chosen, in spite of the fact that you claim, this person claims that she knows she's causing harm and it upsets her, she has chosen to continue to inflict that harm. That's on her. I'm not responsible for that. Okay? Kind of goes back to what so. Go on.
I'm so sick of people using substances as an excuse for horrible behavior, or also in a similar vein, using like neurodivergence or disability as an excuse for horrible behavior. The point of acknowledging that there are other factors contributing to your behavior, like substances, is not to get a free pass for your behavior, is to try and figure out what you need to do to overcome it. If you do something horrible... Sorry, go on.
I was like, if she actually was changing her behavior, like genuinely, she was like shutting everything down, going away. Okay, in hindsight, I could go, okay, like she's actually trying to get her shit together. She is realizing there's an issue. She's not doing that. Like, if substance abuse is an ongoing excuse, and she's going to keep it around forever.
This is very convenient. Yeah, the point of saying, oh, I did this because I was drinking, is not to get a free pass. The point of that is to be like, okay, obviously alcohol is a terrible influence in my life. Can I stop the alcohol? Because if I'm not using the alcohol, then I'm not going to do these bad things. The point of that is people watching can be like, okay, this isn't something you usually do. This is the alcohol. So if you stop using the alcohol, then there's not as much of an issue here. Maybe you'll stop doing the things. Maybe you can be forgiven as long as you stay away from alcohol. Like, that's the point of acknowledging substances. And, you know, also for minor things, it's like, oh, okay, it was one time, it was fairly minor, I can forgive you, it was the substances, you know, as long as you don't do it again. The point is not to get a free pass, it's to figure out how to fix the situation. And a while ago, I did a bit of a rant about this in terms of neurodivergence in connection with the Mystic Minds thing. Well, like, the point of saying, oh, I did this because I'm autistic is to get a free pass for hurting people. The point is, like, are there ways that you can cope? Are there accommodations and supports that we can use to deal with this in a healthy way? Is there a miscommunication? It's about solving the problem by either you change your behavior or other people help support you or something. It's not about getting a free pass. If you're hurting people, you need to stop, full stop. It doesn't matter what the reason is. The only reason to acknowledge the reason is that you can be more effective in stopping that harmful behavior.
Yeah. Like, I get the whole idea, you're not a bad person, you're in a bad situation, but if you don't fucking care about being in that situation, how it's hurting others, then, like, again, I go back to what is the archetype of your traditional domestic abuser? It's a guy that drinks a lot and throws bottles at his wife. So fucking what? he's an abuser. It doesn't matter. And the same goes for people who want to defend and worship abusers, because you are normalizing them and telling them that they still belong in society, even as they continue to like harbor these feelings and do everything without any sort of remorse or desire to change anything. And no, it's just, yeah.
One thing you never hear from people like this is, I'm sorry, full stop. You never hear things like, I'm sorry, I did a bad thing. I'm sorry, I made a bad decision. I'm sorry, I hurt people. You never hear them actually acknowledge that they did something wrong. There's always a but. There's always an if, an and. Usually they don't say anything in the first place. It's just like, oh, I just did this and all these people are being mean to me. And like, if you can't even give a fucking apologies are not that hard. If you can't even give an apology, then how can we trust you to moderate your own behavior?
Yeah. Right. Moving forward, quote, Natalie has done so much good for trans people and some harm. Please, I just ask that we treat her with respect to her intentions and consider her best intentions as well as her mistakes. I'm not saying ignore her mistakes. End quote. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Like, literally. I am criticizing her. I'm pointing out, like, the fact that I used to fucking look up to her. I used to make fucking fan art that included her. I used to fucking run to her to let her know when I seen her jokes in places like D&D circles. Okay? I was treating her charitably for the longest fucking time. I ignored the repeated MB-phobia shit, okay? But when she chose, after, like, even when Buck Angel thing happened, my only post on the matter was about Buck Angel and criticizing him. I didn't say a fucking word on her, okay? Only when she came back and decided to fucking defend him and promote him as some fucking great thing, as a trans icon, someone we should all be thankful for, on our knees, worshipping. Okay? When she chose to do that, that is when I took a major issue and I spoke out. So yeah, this is an attempt to stop people critiquing her. Because if it weren't, you'd be actually addressing the points, not making excuses.
It's very interesting how, you criticize someone and immediately their fans come rushing like, I'm not saying you can't criticize her, but, and it's like, if you were really okay with criticism, then why are you so quick to shut down something that is literally just criticism? Mm-hmm. Like, that's all it is, and you want to shut it down.
I wasn't abusive, I wasn't foul, I didn't misgender her, I didn't do all this other shit. I was quite level-headed in my criticism.
And most people won't even watch the damn video when they're denouncing it. Mm. Like, it's very clearly just you do not want people saying negative things about your queen. Mm. And no amount of saying, oh, you can criticize her, changes the fact that, no, you obviously don't tolerate that.
Mm. Anyway, she moves on. Quote, also, before I go there, Natalie doing good shit does not wash her hand of the bad shit she does, and she does not nearly do anywhere near as much good as she has done harm in the long run. I'm sorry. Seeing how she fucking torn apart the trans community, seeing how she's made it unsafe for victims of domestic abuse, victims of MB-phobia, and people who were caught up in Buck's pyramid fucking scheme. No, she hasn't done more good than bad. She's made a few videos. Okay. And she may have led some people into reconsidering trans issues, but in the long run it seems like a lot of those people still harbor their same abusive shit. Consider people like Xanderhol. They just like dressing it up behind the language of being woke in order to shield from criticism. They haven't de-radicalized anyone. They've got their own little private army now. That's what they've done. Moving forward, quote, you reference J.K. Rowling in the video and compare her to Natalie Wynn, but miss the context that Natalie's latest video is likely the most powerful counterspeech to J.K. Rowling's hatred in the world, based in viewership and how engaging it is, while really showing the problem. Her friend and huge YouTuber, Lindsay Ellis, also collaborated with Natalie to extend the reach of speaking against J.K. Rowling. This shows the value Natalie gives the community, value we need more than ever right now. End quote. The latest video is bullshit. It's fucking milquetoast critique. It is not powerful. And a lot of it is spent fucking justifying the actions. As as someone who was cancelled, I think J.K. Rowling really was just trying to do the right fucking thing. No, she wasn't. She has this bloody hatred of us, and she wants to harm us. There's no fucking genuine concern there, and don't fucking pretend like they do. All you're doing is setting the entire discourse back years. That's all you're doing by that. And yeah, the video itself is being used to excuse abusive behavior. As I noted at the end of the video on Luxembourg, next video I'll be doing on that series, but I've got a few other things to stop off by first, is a video pointing out how Luxembourg encouraged Xanderhal to exploit my history as a survivor of domestic abuse to argue that I must be an abuser in order to hurt me and force me to be silent. When called out on this, Luxembourg quoted Natalie's J.K. Rowling video. And I immediately saw the rhetoric in the J.K. Rowling video designed to defend J.K. Rowling and Natalie, who compares herself to J.K. Rowling. Do you know where I've seen that rhetoric before? It's the same fucking rhetoric used by Buck Angel in the Senpai Notice Me post. That's what I mean. She has internalized abusive rhetoric, and she is selling it as theory. She is helping abuse culture. Sorry about that, there was a mosquito that was coming right at me. Anything you'd like to add?
Not that I can think of. No.
Okay, we'll finish it now. Quote, I do not say she's perfect, and she doesn't say she's perfect, but I am saying she doesn't deserve to be treated as a hateful person that is against non-binary people. You don't have to like her, but please, do you also need to condemn her and ask the community to exclude her? Why? End quote. Because she worships and defends domestic abusers. Why is that so fucking hard to understand? It's just fucking... It's just disgusting. Oh, why do you have to call them out and all this? It's because their fucking actions are hurting people. And that's the way things are. Yes, the pyramid scheme was called Transgasm. But, yeah, and that's really the only, most of the responses I got to that video were nitpicky things like wash your hair, or, shit like this. I forgot what the other one was. Go outside. They were just shit like this. These are the only two long draft ones that I got. I was like, I can't throw them away. But they're so fucking dishonest, I don't want to post them either. Because even if I respond in the comments, the thing about the way the comments work is you see the original comment and you don't see the replies unless you click see. And it's there's so much dishonest shit in here that it's just, it does not belong in a good faith discussion. They never address or deal with my actual arguments. They never actually discuss a point made. They just throw out the facts that substance abuse apparently justifies all actions. Not saying it justifies all actions, but it totally does justify all actions. But yeah. And that's it.
Before we end the stream, I did get an update on the positive story from earlier, if you want to hear that.
Sure.
So it turns out that the reason why Javannah is running for mayor of what's the place called? Rochester, is because the police there killed a black man with mental health problems called Daniel Prude, and the current mayor has refused to punish the police for this and has been defending them. So Javannah was basically like, well, screw this, I guess I'll just be mayor then, which I think is amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's sad that it has to be done, but Like, it is
Oh yeah,
inspirational.
absolutely. But it is. I just. It is absolutely terrible that it has to be done. I did say that in the DMs where I was told about this, but I'm also just amazed at that response, and I hope she wins, and I wish her well, and yeah.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the show. If you could hunt for any questions in the chat, I will just go into sort of like a wrap-up thing. I will be doing the timestamps once the show is done, but it will take me a while. Also, do know that if you like our work, you can always support us via Patreon. The link is down below. We no longer monetize our videos and our streams, so our only income is via Patreon and Super Chats. So if you want to help us out, keep the channel running, keep us, well, fed, that would be very helpful and very much appreciated. Even $1 or $2 donations help out a long way. And on that note, I'd just like to thank the following patron sponsors: Hannah Banghart, Matthew Kovacs, Ryan Katie, Garrett Van Voorst, Steve Corbin, Sosh Daniels, and Justin Allen. So have you seen any questions?
I don't see any, no. I know there's a question in the beginning, but I think that one was kind of answered indirectly
Okay.
by the whole discussion.
I think this is our longest show yet.
Yeah.
It's been kind of a depressing one as well. I only saw us get up to 69 viewers, but we shall see when the analytics are done. I'm stretching in front of everybody. I do apologize. My hair is really soft right now. I'm just going to tease people with that. Like, I don't know. Can you see how soft it is with the light and everything? It's just. But yeah. Hopefully we've done well with the stream today, and hopefully you all still get a use out of it. I know a lot of you were up very early for us. I know that some of you have been turning up as you've been waking up. So yeah, thanks everyone for turning up and supporting us. The nails are bisexual as always. So yeah, but always certain fingers are a little shorter than others. But yeah. If you'd also like to talk, you can always find us on Discord. My Twitter is now open as well, so you can always message us there if you see any stories. But yeah, hopefully the next show will be more positive. And yeah, I keep saying yeah a lot. I realise that. I'm just kind of tired. I literally woke up like 5.5 hours ago, and I spent almost 4 of those streaming. So yeah. Thank you all for turning up.
I woke up, I checked the Discord, I finished my notes at the last possible second, and then I jumped on the stream, so that was fun. We're both just complete mess.
Yeah. So thank you all for being with us throughout this, and we shall leave the chat running for a couple of minutes so you can all say goodbye to everyone. But yes, this is goodbye from myself and Levi. So bye now.
Bye everyone, thank you for watching.
Watching.